Chapter 2230. Ice Tower. My lord, the spacetime key is in this valley. Tang Wuying stood at the entrance of the valley and pointed towards the valley as he spoke respectfully. However, Zhuowen could sense fear in Tang Wuying's eyes. It was obvious that Tang Wuying was extremely fearful of this valley, or else he wouldn't reveal such an expression. "You've been in there before?" Zhuowen asked. Tang Wuying hurriedly replied, "I've indeed been in there, but I didn't go far before I was forced to leave due to the terrifying cold air. The cold air here is terrifying. Please be careful when you go in." Zhuowen was rather surprised. If there was cold air in the valley, why didn't he feel it at all when he was at the entrance? "You go in first." Zhuowen still didn't trust Tang Wuying and indicated for him to go in first. Tang Wuying had no choice but to enter the valley under Zhuowen's watch, with Zhuowen following closely behind. The moment Zhuowen stepped into the valley, his entire body trembled as a bone-chilling cold assaulted him. Only then did Zhuowen realize that the scenery inside the valley was another world. It was a world of ice and snow, with countless icebergs standing tall in the surroundings. The air was filled with a bone-chilling cold. Even Zhuowen felt a chill that made him shiver. The ground was a smooth ice surface, like a clear mirror. Zhuowen could clearly see the details of his face when he lowered his head as he walked on the ice surface. Chen Changsheng brought Tang Wuzong and Tang Wuxi and walked at the back. Tang Wuying brought Zhuowen's group and walked for an hour before stopping. "My lord, the cold air here is too terrifying. I can't withstand it at all. Just follow the icebergs in front and you'll find the location of the spacetime key." Tang Wuying suddenly stopped and said with trembling lips. Zhuowen glanced at the shivering Tang Wuying. Tang Wuxi and Tang Wuzong, who were brought along by Chen Changsheng, were in an even worse state. Tang Wuxi had already fainted from the cold. Even Zhuowen was having a hard time resisting the cold air. Zhuowen's eyes flickered as he nodded at Tang Wuying and said, "You may leave first." Tang Wuying felt as if he had been granted amnesty. He repeatedly cupped his fists at Zhuowen, then led Tang Wuzong and Tang Wuxi back the way they came. "Master, the cold air here is too terrifying. Do you still intend to continue?" Chen Changsheng frowned. Zhuowen nodded and said, "Let's move on. I must get the spacetime key. You can hide in the Kanglan mystery realm for now." However, Chen Changsheng shook his head and said, "Sir, there's no need. I can still take it, but I'm a little puzzled. There's no information about the spacetime key in this valley, so why is Tang Wuying so sure that this place is the spacetime key?" Zhuowen stared blankly for a moment before revealing a cold glint in his eyes. Chen Changsheng was right. Tang Wuying could only last up to this point and there was only a vast expanse of whiteness in front of him. How could Tang Wuying be so sure that there was a spacetime divine key in front of him? There's something wrong with Tang Wuying. He might have purposely led us here. Zhuowen's gaze slightly changed, but he quickly felt that he might have been wrong. Perhaps before Tang Wuying came in, the cold air here wasn't so dense, but as time passed, the cold air became more and more terrifying. Tang Wuying didn't seem to be lying. If he was lying, Zhuowen would be able to tell at a glance. After all, his divine sense was now much stronger than ordinary cultivators. Tang Wuying's divine sense, which was only at the initial stage of Void Sky 8 steps, was simply trash compared to his. But where did this cold air come from? Why did it become more and more terrifying? Zhuowen advanced another few hundred meters and finally couldn't take the terrifying cold air any longer. The surface of his skin began to be covered with thick icicles, and his blood seemed to be about to be frozen by this terrifying cold air. Chen Changsheng wasn't feeling very well either, but this guy had been holding it in and didn't say anything. Zhuowen sighed slightly and summoned the Kanglan secret realm to keep Chen Changsheng. At the same time, Zhuowen summoned the Thunder Fire Sword, borrowing the heat of the Thunder Fire Sword to resist the terrifying cold air in the surroundings. Although Xiao He was obviously dissatisfied with being summoned to resist the cold air, this guy didn't mean what he said. Although he said that he wasn't willing, he still released the energy of the Thunder Fire Sword to surround Zhuowen. After advancing another 1,000 meters, the cold air was too terrifying, and even the surroundings were stirred up by a snowstorm. The Thunder Fire Sword couldn't withstand it, and was eventually stored in Zhuowen's spirit ring. Zhuowen then summoned his doppelganger, Devour. Devour was already a thunder fire true god, and he had also awakened the royal bloodline, which made him extremely powerful. He believed that with the strength of Devour's physical body, he should be able to withstand the increasingly terrifying cold air. Indeed, after Devour came out, although the cold air was terrifying, it didn't have much effect on Devour. In the wind and snow, Zhuo Wen walked for another 1,000 meters before finally coming to a stop. His gaze landed on the end of the path, where a sharp ice tower stood. The surface of the ice tower was as smooth as a mirror, reflecting dazzling light. Zhuo Wen could see clearly that the tip of the ice tower was releasing terrifying cold air unceasingly. The space-time key should be in that ice tower. Zhuo Wen's real body leaped onto Devour's head, and Devour followed his order, dashing toward the ice tower. Devour's body was so massive that after revealing his real body, Zhuo Wen had shrunk his body to around 100 meters, which was the smallest size that Devour could shrink to. However, even so, 100 meters was still huge. The moment Devour came within 10 meters of the ice tower, Zhuo Wen had a bad premonition. Then, he found that Devour's limbs began to freeze, turning into smooth ice sculptures. Zhuo Wen's real body, who was standing on Devour's head, felt a cold air rising from the soles of his feet. Right after that, he found that his feet were frozen. Moreover, the freezing trend was spreading to his thighs and even his upper body. Crack. Furthermore, Zhuo Wen was horrified to discover that as his feet continued to freeze into ice sculptures, the ice sculptures would shatter into countless ice shards when the wind blew past. In just a blink of an eye, Zhuo Wen's thighs had turned into ice chips, turning into nothingness. Not only Zhuo Wen's real body, but Devour's limbs also began to shatter into ice chips after being frozen. Half of his 4 massive beast hooves had disappeared in just a blink of an eye. At this moment, Zhuo Wen had only one feeling in his heart: so cold. It was a bone-chilling cold. It was the first time in his life that he had ever felt so cold. Zhuo Wen roared indignantly, immediately retrieving his real body into the Kanglan secret domain. Devour faced the sky and roared. The extreme lightning and fire power in his body gushed out crazily, preventing the terrifying cold air from eroding his limbs. Zhuo Wen understood clearly that if he let the cold air invade his body, Devour's limbs would be destroyed. Moreover, it wouldn't be as simple as that. It could even endanger his life. With that thought in mind, Zhuo Wen released his lightning and fire power to cover his entire body. The terrifying lightning and fire power gushed out like a flood, which looked magnificent. At the same time, the cold air that had been spreading from Devour's limbs slowed down as Zhuo Wen was pouring out his lightning and flame power. Chapter 2231. Fatty, I have to get out of this place as soon as possible. Otherwise, I'll probably die here. Zhuo Wen's eyes were filled with fright. He controlled Devour's body, trying to get away from the ice tower. However, just as Zhuo Wen was about to turn around, his soul consciousness accidentally scanned the back of the ice tower. It was a Daokong hole. Zhuo Wen's eyes twinkled. The surface of the ice tower was as smooth as a mirror, without any flaws. However, there was a hole on the back of the tower. Zhuo Wen suspected that this was the only entrance to the ice tower. Thinking of this, Zhuo Wen revealed a hesitant expression. He knew that if the hole was not the entrance, he would miss the opportunity to leave the range of the ice pagoda if he rashly went in. The chances of him dying would be too great. However, this ice tower could hide a space-time key. Zhuo Wen didn't want to give up. Let's take a gamble. Zhuo Wen's eyes shot out a sharp light. His mind flickered, and Devour roared, dashing toward the ice tower. At this moment, Devour's 4 beast hooves had turned into ice sculptures. While flying, they shattered into countless ice fragments. When Devour reached the back of the ice tower, the cold air had spread to his lower body, which began to shatter. Get in. With only his upper body left, Devour roared and dashed into the hole on the back of the ice tower. The moment Devour got into the hole, his upper body was frozen by the cold air. Then, it shattered, leaving only a massive head. Phew. This place isn't affected by the cold air outside. Devour exhaled in relief. He knew he had made the right bet. He summoned Zhuo Wen's real body. His feet, which had been shattered by the cold air, had recovered completely. After all, at his level, as long as his god soul wasn't destroyed, the wounds on his body weren't a big deal. Devour's head glowed with a black light. Then, his body began to recover. However, Devour's body was too big. It would take a long time for him to recover completely. Thus, Zhuowen put him into his spirit ring first. At this moment, Zhuowen began to examine his surroundings. He saw that he was surrounded by crystal-clear ice walls. The ice wall was made up of blocks of ice bricks. It looked ancient and mysterious. Although the surrounding cold air was dense, it was nothing compared to the terrifying cold air outside the ice tower. Zhuowen looked into the depths of the passageway. It was pitch black, and he couldn't even see his own fingers. He couldn't see the end of it. Zhuowen knew that if he wanted to reach the top of the pagoda, he had to move forward. Zhuowen summoned the Thunder Fire Sword and the Blood Fairy Sword and said, "You two, protect me." Xiao He patted his chest and assured Zhuowen that there would be no problem. The Blood Fairy Sword was also a bootlicker. Zhuowen didn't have a choice. Devour had only one head left, and it would take him a long time to recover. At this moment, he could only rely on his real body. His real body wasn't particularly strong. At most, it was stronger than the Blood Fairy Sword, but it might be weaker than the Thunderfire Sword. Thus, he could only ask these two guys to protect him. As for Chen Changsheng, Zhuowen didn't summon him. He didn't know what was going on inside the ice tower, so he didn't want to use all of his trump cards. Zhuowen moved forward slowly along the passageway. However, as he moved forward, the shock in Zhuowen's eyes became more and more intense. Because on both sides of the ice wall, there were frozen corpses with ferocious faces. From the clothes on these corpses, Zhuowen could tell that these corpses were definitely not people of this era. They must be people from a very long time ago. Although these corpses were all frozen, Zhuowen could feel that these corpses were definitely experts when they were alive. Along the way, in addition to the human corpses, Zhuowen also saw many giant starry sky beasts. This passageway was winding and spiraling upwards. After walking for 6 hours, Zhuowen finally stopped. That was because he had already reached the top of the ice tower, the end of the tunnel. And at the top of the dome, Zhuowen saw a shocking scene. On the crystal-clear dome, two terrifying giant starry sky beasts were confronting each other. Unfortunately, the scene of these two giant starry sky beasts confronting each other was completely frozen on the dome. The reason why Zhuowen was shocked was because he wasn't unfamiliar with these two giant starry sky beasts. The one on the left was covered in golden light and had a sharp horn on its head. Wasn't that Devour? Moreover, the golden scales on Devour's body indicated that it was Devour King, the king of the Devouring clan. Opposite Devour King was a majestic 5-clawed divine dragon. This 5-clawed divine dragon wasn't any smaller than Devour King. In fact, to some extent, it was even bigger than Devour King. However, what left Zhuowen speechless was that in the middle of the two giant starry sky beasts' confrontation, a round fatty was also frozen. This fatty was simply too fat. He was so round that he didn't even have a waist. His entire body was like a ball, and the fat on his face was like a small ball. From afar, it looked like a small ball was piled on top of a big ball. It looked like a snowman in the snow. It was a hilarious sight. The moment Zhuowen's gaze fell on the fatty, his eyes narrowed. This was because he noticed that the fatty was tightly gripping a white key in his hand. Needless to say, even if Zhuowen hadn't seen this white key before, he could guess that it was the time-space divine key. Zhuowen looked at the Devour King and the 5-clawed golden dragon on both sides of the fatty. He knew that these two giant starry sky beasts were fighting over the time-space divine key in the fatty's hand. However, for some unknown reason, they were frozen by the terrifying cold air. At the top of the ice tower, other than the 5-clawed golden dragon, the Devour King, and the fatty, there was nothing else. It was cold and empty. "Xiao He, try and see if you can break the ice on the dome," Zhuowen said to the Thunderfire Sword. Although Xiao He wasn't very willing, he still followed Zhuowen's instructions. He turned into a ray of sword light and blasted at the ice. Boom! With a muffled sound, the Thunderfire Sword was sent flying and fell to the ground. Then, Zhuowen heard Xiao He's cursing voice. The content was naturally about how strong the ice was. Zhuowen looked at the undamaged ice on the dome, and his eyes revealed a trace of shock. The ice on the dome was actually so strong. The Thunderfire sword's full force attack actually didn't leave a single mark on the ice. Brat, this ice is too strong. This dragon lord can't break it. You have to think of a way. Xiao Hei floated beside Zhuowen again and said in an extremely displeased tone. Zhuowen scratched his head awkwardly. His powerful divine sense spread out and scanned the surroundings. He knew that there was definitely a way to obtain the time-space divine key. It was just that he hadn't found it yet. Chapter 2232. Level 9. Zhuowen's perception was extremely sharp. When the fat man's eyes rolled around, he raised his head and his sharp gaze met the fat man's. The fat man wasn't afraid. Instead, he looked straight at Zhuowen. His eyes blinked as if he was telling Zhuowen that he was still alive. At the same time, a weak voice came from Zhuowen's sea of consciousness. Fellow Daoist, can you do me a favor? Zhuowen looked at the fat man. He knew that the owner of this divine sense should be the fat man who was sealed in the ice dome. However, Zhuowen was surprised that the fat man was still alive even though the Devourer King and the five-clawed golden dragon were frozen to death. He knew very well how terrifying the ice walls inside the ice tower were. They weren't any weaker than the cold air outside the tower. Moreover, the fat man was holding the time-space divine key. The time-space divine key that the Devourer King and the five-clawed golden dragon fought over had ended up in the fat man's hands. He didn't believe that the fat man was a simple character. Fellow Daoist, don't stare at me in a daze. Although I'm very handsome, you should wake up and do me a small favor. The fat man's divine sense came again. Zhuowen pondered for a while and replied, why should I help you? The fat man chuckled and said, fellow Daoist, you should be here for the time-space divine key in my hands, right? Since you can come here, it means that you're not simple. If you help me, you'll be helping yourself to the time-space divine key. Zhuowen looked at the white key in the fat man's hand and said indifferently, do you know a way to break this ice layer? The fat man smiled and said, I know, of course I know. And the method is very simple. Let me tell you, the reason why this ice tower was formed is because of the ice origin at the bottom of this ice tower. This ice essence is good stuff. It is the most primitive power of ice and the origin of all ice-type power. Back then, I was too careless and didn't notice the ice essence inside, which led to me being trapped here. As long as you find the origin of ice and completely isolate the power of the origin of ice, the frozen world of this ice pagoda will completely collapse and I will regain my freedom. When the time comes, I will give you the space-time key. Zhuowen's heart was filled with shock. The origin source was a mysterious and unfathomable power. In the starry skies, every origin source power was rare. Now that the fat man said that the ice tower had the ice origin, Zhuowen subconsciously felt that it was impossible. However, when he thought of the terrifying cold qi in this place, which had penetrated deep into his bones and even his soul, it was extremely oppressive. This was the first time he had felt such a terrifying cold. He knew that other than the origin of ice mentioned by the fatty, there was no other explanation for this. You'll just die if you go there. The fat man didn't think so. He said leisurely, that's because you're too ignorant. The power of the ice origin isn't as strong as before. You saw those frozen bodies from the bottom of the ice tower to the top, didn't you? Even the legendary kings of the Dragon Clan and the Devouring Clan were frozen. To seal so many experts in ice, even if it's the ice origin source, it must have exhausted all of its strength and energy. Now is the moment when the ice origin source is at its weakest, and it's also a rare opportunity to subdue it. Of course, if you're afraid, I won't force you. Then, the fat man closed his eyes. It seemed that he wasn't in a hurry to let Zhuowen save him. Zhuowen knitted his brows. He had gone through untold hardships to get to this ice tower. He couldn't go back empty-handed. Although Zhuowen didn't trust the fat man, he had no choice but to trust him. After all, he knew nothing about this ice tower. He didn't know anything about it. Where's the ice origin? Asked Zhuowen in a low-pitched voice. Zhuowen made up his mind. First, He would ask for the location of the ice origin. After he got in, he would decide if he should take action or not. If it was too dangerous, he would leave immediately and come back when he was stronger. The fat man opened his eyes, which revealed an undetectable joy. He sent his voice to Shuyang. The ice origin is at the center of the top. There's a shielding formation there. There's an altar inside the shielding formation. The ice origin is in that altar. Shielding formation? Zhuowen's eyes darkened. He didn't feel any fluctuation of the shielding formation here. He thought the fat man was lying. Ignorance is blameless. You don't feel any fluctuation of the shielding formation, so you think I'm lying? The fat man sent his voice discontentedly. Zhuowen didn't say anything. He just nodded, indicating that he did think so. Take another 10 steps forward. If you still think I'm lying, then I have nothing to say, snorted the fat man. Zhuowen frowned. After thinking about it, he still followed the fat man's instructions and took another 10 steps forward. When he took the 10th step, he narrowed his eyes. He could vaguely feel the fluctuation of the shielding formation. The fluctuation was too weak. If it wasn't for his divine sense, which was far stronger than ordinary cultivators, he wouldn't have been able to detect the fluctuation of the shielding formation. What a hidden shielding formation! Could this shielding formation be a level 9 formation? Zhuowen was shocked. A shielding formation that he couldn't detect was definitely a level 9 formation. Zhuowen was now a level 7 formation master. Coupled with his terrifying divine sense, even a level 8 formation wouldn't be able to escape his eyes. However, Zhuowen hadn't noticed the shielding formation. If it wasn't for the fat man's reminder, he wouldn't have even noticed it. Chapter 2233. Ma Yujie. This fatty is indeed a level 9 divine array master. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed, but he was secretly on guard. A level 9 divine array master was extremely terrifying. Zhuowen had to be extremely careful when facing such a person. After all, if the fatty had set up some kind of trap, he would not be able to see through it. Therefore, while Zhuowen was breaking the formation according to the method the fatty had given him, he was also carefully observing with his consciousness. If there was the slightest problem, Zhuowen would immediately stop. He did not want to buy himself a ticking time bomb. However, Zhuowen was disappointed. No matter how he probed with his consciousness, he did not find any problems with the method. The moment Zhuowen withdrew his hand, there was a violent fluctuation in front of him. Then, a majestic altar appeared in front of Zhuowen. This altar was made of crystal clear ice blocks. It looked as smooth as a mirror, and there was a cold and vicissitude aura flowing out from it. At the center of the altar, an ice-blue heart was slowly beating. Zhuowen felt an unprecedented bone-piercing chill from this heart. Although this heart was sealed in the altar, the chill filled Zhuowen's heart very clearly, making him feel a sense of reverence. This is the origin of ice. Now, follow my instructions and completely seal the origin of ice. When the time comes, this ice tower will collapse on its own. Seeing the ice-blue heart in the altar, the fatty's eyes flashed with a blazing light. He urgently transmitted his voice. Zhuowen frowned slightly, then took out a broken ice lotus from his spirit ring. This was the everlasting ice lotus. Zhuowen had obtained it from the top floor of Yu Wuxi's cave dwelling, the Nether Hall. It was Yu Wuxi's most important treasure. The effect of the everlasting ice lotus was indeed heaven-defying. Zhuowen sat on the ice lotus and cultivated. It was easier for him to touch the starry sky laws, and his cultivation speed was many times faster than usual. Unfortunately, the everlasting ice lotus was broken when Chen Changsheng, Fu Yu's, Yang Zhonghui, and the other ancestors attacked him. Its power was not as strong as before, so Zhuowen had long forgotten about this everlasting ice lotus. But now, he was looking at the everlasting ice lotus with a blazing gaze. Because the moment the ice origin was opened, he could clearly feel the everlasting ice lotus's strange movements. He could feel the ice lotus's joyful mood. After all, the everlasting ice lotus was a treasure of heaven and earth. It had already gained sentience. Zhuowen knew that this everlasting ice lotus was yearning for the ice origin. Shit! It's the everlasting ice lotus. Frozen in the dome, Fatty's face turned ugly. He recognized the everlasting ice lotus at a glance. The everlasting ice lotus was definitely a supreme treasure of heaven and earth. Before this ice lotus matured, its power was mediocre, but once it matured, it would become terrifying. Judging from Zhuowen's broken ice lotus, it was obviously an immature everlasting ice lotus. Moreover, it was a broken ice lotus. Generally speaking, a broken ice lotus should be worthless, but if the everlasting ice lotus encountered the ice origin, it would be a great fortune. This was because the ice origin could rapidly mature the everlasting ice lotus in a short time, turning it into a real everlasting ice lotus. This was also the reason why the fatty's face turned so ugly when he saw the everlasting ice lotus. Although the fatty was trapped because of the ice origin, who wouldn't want something as precious as the ice origin? He knew very well that his attainments in the Tao of formations far surpassed Zhuowen's. As long as Zhuowen set up the formation according to his method, he would be able to obtain the ice origin source without anyone noticing. But now, it seemed that the chances were slim. Whoosh! At this moment, the everlasting ice lotus buzzed and turned into a blue light. It poured into the altar and steadily landed on the ice blue heart. Zhuowen could clearly see ice blue energy rays coming out of the heart and converging into the everlasting ice lotus. Zhuowen stared at this scene. He didn't know much about the everlasting ice lotus, but it didn't mean that he was a fool. He could clearly feel that the everlasting ice lotus was evolving and transforming. At this moment, Zhuowen was wild with joy. He didn't expect that the ice origin, which was like a flood and a fierce beast, could be dealt with so easily. He knew very well that when the everlasting ice lotus absorbed all the energy of the ice origin, it would be many times more terrifying than before. Fatty, you seem to know about the everlasting ice lotus. Can you tell me more about the everlasting ice lotus? Taking advantage of the gap between the everlasting ice lotus absorbing the ice origin, Zhuowen looked up at the frozen fatty and asked indifferently. You actually don't know the origin of the everlasting ice lotus? My God, how did you get this everlasting ice lotus? The fatty looked at Zhuowen in disbelief and the corners of his mouth twitched. Zhuowen smiled embarrassedly and said, I got it by accident. He couldn't say that he snatched it. Although this was the truth, Zhuowen was naturally too embarrassed to say it. The fatty didn't doubt him and coughed dryly. Actually, this everlasting ice lotus isn't very useful to you. Why don't you exchange it with me? I have a secondary heaven-breaking divine artifact on me. What do you think? Zhuowen secretly despised this fatty. Wasn't this guy trying to hide something? He even planned to exchange a secondary heaven-breaking divine artifact. As long as one wasn't a fool, they would know that this everlasting ice lotus was definitely more precious than a secondary heaven-breaking divine artifact. A mere secondary heaven-breaking divine artifact isn't enough. Zhuowen shook his head. He already had 2 secondary heaven-breaking divine artifacts, so he didn't have much need for them. Moreover, he could sense that the everlasting ice lotus wasn't as simple as it appeared to be on the surface. He definitely wouldn't exchange this everlasting ice lotus with boundless potential. The fatty gritted his teeth and said, how about this? 2 secondary heaven-breaking divine artifacts, 2 level 9 divine pills, and 2 level 9 divine herbs. What do you think? This is already the most generous offer I can make. Zhuowen's heart jolted. This fatty was far too rich, wasn't he? He actually had 2 secondary heaven-breaking divine artifacts, a level 9 divine pill, and a level 9 divine herb. Moreover, this fatty was able to make such an offer, so it was clear that he definitely had more valuable items on him. This was definitely a rich fatty. My apologies, I won't exchange this everlasting ice lotus. However, you have to keep your promise. The time and space key in your hand is the price I have to pay for saving you. Zhuowen looked at the white key in the fatty's hand with a meaningful expression. The fatty smiled sheepishly, and said, don't worry, brother. I'm a man of my word, and I definitely won't go back on my word. May I know your name, brother? Zhuowen. Zhuowen replied calmly. So it's brother Zhuo. You and I hit it off right away. As the saying goes, all men are brothers. It's fate that we were able to meet in this vast galaxy. My name is Ma Yujie, and people used to call me Grandpa Ma. Hee hee. The fatty chuckled in a friendly manner. Zhuowen casually cupped his hands in greeting before walking around. At the same time, he took out 81 beast bone formation discs from his spirit ring. Using the method of 9 by 9 to return to 1, he started to set up interference formations, anti-flight formations, and death trap formations in the surroundings. Zhuowen was really worried about this fatty. After all, the latter was a level 9 divine formation master. Putting aside his actual strength, just his terrifying formation skills alone were enough to make Zhuowen suffer. Chapter 2234. Absorbing the origin of Ice Brother Zhuo. This is not right. Why did you set up so many arrays here? What are you planning to do? Ma Yujie hurriedly transmitted his voice. Zhuowen sneered in his heart, but he said helplessly, Brother Ma, I'm just taking precautions. After the origin of ice is completely absorbed by the everlasting ice lotus, I'm afraid there will be some abnormalities in the ice tower. I have to make preparations in advance. Ma Yujie's face was a little ugly. He knew that Zhuowen was definitely doing it on purpose. He was definitely worried about him. However, he was also a little helpless, especially after he revealed his 9th tier array Dao. No one would be too worried about him. After all, once a divine array master reached the 9th tier, his strength would be extremely powerful. It was not something that an 8th tier array master could be compared to. After setting up all kinds of arrays, Zhuowen returned to the center of the altar. His gaze fell on the everlasting ice lotus. At this moment, the lotus on the everlasting ice lotus was no longer snow white. Instead, it was ice blue. Moreover, the aura on the ice lotus was much more terrifying than before. Even Zhuowen was a little frightened when he felt the aura on the ice lotus. In particular, the everlasting ice lotus was faintly emitting cold air. It made Zhuowen feel that if he came into contact with the cold air, his entire soul would be frozen and shattered. At this moment, the everlasting ice lotus seemed to have taken root. It covered the ice-blue heart formed by the origin of ice. He could even see the roots of the everlasting ice lotus entering the blue heart. Zhuowen knew that it would take some time for the everlasting ice lotus to completely absorb the origin of ice. He simply sat cross-legged on the ground and began to cultivate. The energy here was much denser than the outside world. Since he had nothing to do, Zhuowen naturally would not waste this rare opportunity to cultivate. After half a month, the origin of ice on the altar was finally completely absorbed by the everlasting ice lotus. At this moment, the surface of the everlasting ice lotus was completely covered in ice blue. It looked very beautiful. Zhuowen waved his sleeve. The everlasting ice lotus flew out of the altar and landed in his palm. Although this everlasting ice lotus looked like a flower vase, Zhuowen knew that this ice lotus contained a terrifying amount of cold qi. Catcher. The moment Zhuowen put away the ice lotus, the surrounding ice walls began to shatter, and finally collapsed inch by inch. Pieces of ice fell from the top. If one were to look at it from the outside, the ice tower that pierced through the clouds would begin to collapse, and the height of the ice tower would continue to decrease as time passed. Zhuowen, who was standing inside the ice tower, saw with his own eyes the corpses sealed in the ice walls shatter into pieces of ice and dissipate in the wind. Even the Devourer King and the 5-clawed golden dragon, who were confronting each other on the dome, were reduced to dust. As for the fatty sealed in ice between Devourer King and the 5-clawed golden dragon, his eyes spun. As if he had lost the suppression of the ice origin, a golden flame gushed out from his body. Bang! The golden flame was extremely terrifying. The surrounding ice melted instantly, and the fatty stomped his right foot, intending to slip away. The moment the fatty touched the array that Zhuowen had set up, he didn't panic. With a wave of his huge palm, the array was pierced through like a thin piece of paper. The fatty nimbly got out of the array. Zhuowen's pupils shrank. This fatty's array Dao level was too high. The array he had set up with great effort couldn't even stop him for a breath of time. Where do you think you're going? Zhuowen's eyes darkened. He knew that the fatty wasn't reliable, so he set up the array in advance. However, He didn't expect that the array he set up couldn't even stop the fatty for a breath of time. It was his mistake. Brother Zhua, lend me the spacetime key for now. After Master Fatty is done with it, I will definitely return it to you. Ma Yujie's mocking voice came from mid-air. Zhuoan rushed out of the collapsed ice tower and found that Ma Yujie was only a black dot left. His speed was extremely fast. Even if Zhuoan went at full speed, he wouldn't be able to catch up with him. This guy hasn't escaped from this world of ice and snow. I wonder if I can use the everlasting ice lotus to restrict his speed. Zhuoan thought of the everlasting ice lotus that had absorbed the ice origin. He quickly took it out and threw it out with his right hand. Immediately, the ice lotus shot up into the sky and began to spin. Suddenly, the world of ice and snow became colder and colder. It was as if the entire space was frozen. The fatty, who was thousands of miles away, held the spacetime key in his hand. His eyes were filled with ecstasy. Haha, I originally thought that I, Lord Fatty, would be completely frozen in the ice tower. Who would have thought that a sucker would actually come and rescue me? This Zhuoan is definitely my lucky star. Ma Yujie was overjoyed. Of course, besides the ecstasy, he also felt a little regretful that the ice origin had been seized by Zhuoan. If he could get the ice origin as well, it would be perfect. Just as Ma Yujie was shaking his head and sighing about the ice origin, he suddenly felt the surrounding cold become more intense. Then, the power of condensation in the entire space became even more terrifying. His originally terrifying speed also dropped because of the sudden increase in the power of condensation. Damn, that guy thought of using the ice origin to control this world of ice and snow so quickly. Ma Yujie's face suddenly turned a little ugly. The reason why he was so anxious to leave this place was mainly because the ice origin was in the hands of Zhuoan. This also meant that Zhuoan had absolute control over this world. As long as he rushed out of this world of ice and snow before Zhuoan could react, then with his level of array Dao and strength, he could escape far away with the spacetime key. Although Ma Yujie thought of killing Zhuoan and seizing the ice origin, his rationality made him immediately extinguish this idea. His intuition told him that Zhuoan was definitely not simple and was very dangerous. If he dared to kill him, he would definitely be in trouble. Moreover, the ice origin was still in the hands of this guy. It was absolutely unwise to go against Zhuoan in this world of ice and snow. Just as thousands of thoughts were running through Ma Yujie's mind, the sound of something breaking through the air sounded behind him. He didn't need to think to know that Zhuoan had caught up. Ma Yujie turned around and said with a smile, "Oh, Brother Zhua is really not an ordinary person. You actually caught up so quickly. Just now, this Ma was just testing whether Brother Zhua had really mastered the ice origin. Now it seems that I worried too much." Zhuoan stopped and sneered, "So according to what you said, your action of running away just now was for my sake?" Ma Yujie didn't seem to hear the sarcasm in Zhuoan's words and said with a cheeky smile, "Of course, I did all this for you, brother. Otherwise, look at my fat body, it wouldn't have been easy." Chapter 2235. Tricked. Oh, I see. Thank you, Brother Ma. According to your promise, you should hand over the spacetime key, right? Zhuoan didn't want to continue flirting with Ma Yujie, so he shrugged. Ma Yujie was still smiling as he said, "Brother Zhua, how about this? I'll keep the spacetime key with me for safekeeping. It's useless to keep it with you anyway. When you need it, I'll return it to you." Zhuoan narrowed his eyes and said impatiently, "Hand it over. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude." Ma Yujie's expression suddenly became serious. He said seriously, "Since Brother Zhua doesn't want me to keep it, I won't force you. This is the spacetime key. Take it. I've said before that a promise cannot be taken back. I'll do what I say." Zhuoan took the spacetime key doubtfully. He scanned it repeatedly with his powerful divine sense, but he didn't find anything suspicious about the spacetime key. Moreover, he did feel the power of spacetime on the spacetime key. This power of spacetime was definitely not fake. Brother Zhua, don't worry. This spacetime key is not easy to fake. I think you should be able to feel the power of spacetime, right? Apart from the spacetime key, what else can have the power of spacetime? Ma Yujie said with a serious face. Zhuowen looked at Ma Yujie from head to toe. When he found that the latter was so serious, he wondered if this guy was acting. However, this fatty was right. The power of spacetime couldn't be faked. Although it was his first time coming into contact with the spacetime key, it wasn't his first time coming into contact with the power of spacetime. Therefore, he could easily sense the powerful power of spacetime in this white spacetime key. After checking it a few more times and confirming that there was nothing wrong with the spacetime key, he put it into his spirit ring and cupped his fists at the fatty in front of him. Zhuowen couldn't see through the fatty's aura. It was obvious that this fatty had a very powerful concealment secret technique. Zhuowen estimated that this fatty's cultivation should be around the 7th or 8th level of the Void Sky stage. He wasn't afraid of him, but he was mainly afraid of this fatty's level 9 array Dao. Zhuowen had never seen a grade 9 array Dao Divine Master before. At least, he had never seen one in the Great Brahma domain. He guessed that even the Great Brahma Palace probably didn't have a grade 9 array Dao Divine Master. Brother Ma is right. You and I hit it off at first sight. I see that Brother Ma's array Dao level is impressive. You should have reached the 9th level of array Dao, right? Zhuowen said with a grin. Ma Yujie's eyes shone with pride as he said, I am indeed a level 9 divine array master. Of course, these are just small tricks. Brother Zhuo shouldn't be interested in them. The corner of Zhuowen's mouth twitched. He had originally planned to exchange knowledge about array formations with this fatty and ask him to impart some experience while he was at it. However, this guy had directly blocked the words he was about to say with a single sentence. Obviously, this fatty had guessed Zhuowen's intention, so he stopped the topic. Brother Zhuo, I see that you are fine. Let's part here. Ma Yujie looked at Zhuowen and said with a smile. This world of ice and snow was still imprisoned by Zhuowen's everlasting ice lotus. Ma Yujie knew that without Zhuowen's permission, it would be difficult for him to leave this world of ice and snow. How about this? As long as Brother Ma answers a few of my questions, I will send Brother Ma out. How about it? Zhuowen said thoughtfully. Ma Yujie frowned and said helplessly, ask away. My question is very simple. What is going on with so many corpses in the ice pagoda? Also, why are there the corpses of the 5-clawed golden dragon and the devouring king in the ice pagoda? And why did you appear between the two corpses? Zhuowen stared at Ma Yujie and asked word by word. Ma Yujie's frown deepened. His eyes rolled a few times before he sighed. Actually, I don't know why there are so many corpses in the ice pagoda. When I entered to look for the spacetime key, those corpses were already there, including the corpses of the devouring king and the 5-clawed golden dragon. At that time, the spacetime key was suspended between the corpses of the devouring king and the 5-clawed golden dragon. At that time, there was a very small gap between the two corpses. At that time, I was possessed and entered the gap. When I obtained the spacetime key, the cold energy in the ice pagoda suddenly became terrifying. Unfortunately, I was frozen inside. Zhuowen took a deep look at Ma Yujie and continued, the cold chi of the ice source is extremely terrifying, right? How did you survive in the ice? Brother Zhuo, this is my secret. Forgive me for not being able to tell you, Ma Yujie said solemnly. Zhuowen recalled the golden flames that burst out of the fatty's body when he broke out of the ice. He knew that the fatty's ability to survive until now should be inseparable from the golden flames in his body. Zhuowen was sure that the golden flames were not simple. When the golden flames appeared, Zhuowen actually felt the power of laws from them. Brother Zhuo, now that I've asked the questions, you should let me out now, right? If you want to break the contract, this Ma might have a way to forcefully leave this place. Ma Yujie looked at Zhuowen in a provocative manner. Zhuowen raised his eyebrows. With a wave of his sleeve, he put away the everlasting ice lotus floating in the air. Suddenly, the surrounding cold energy dropped sharply and returned to its original state. Brother Zhuo, many thanks. This Ma still has some matters to attend to, so I'll take my leave first. Ma Yujie's eyes lit up when he saw that the surrounding cold energy had returned to its original state. He cupped his hands at Zhuowen and quickly left the place. Looking at Ma Yujie leaving in a hurry, Zhuowen frowned slightly. Why was this damn fatty in such a hurry to leave? It was as if he had a guilty conscience. Zhuowen didn't think too much about it. This time, his harvest was extremely bountiful. Not only did he obtain the ice origin and increase the power of the everlasting ice lotus, but he also obtained the white spacetime key. He knew that there were a total of 3 spacetime keys. Now that he had unexpectedly obtained one, he also had clues about the other one. As long as he could find the 3rd spacetime key, he would be able to open the spacetime temple. Although he knew very little about the spacetime temple, from how precious the spacetime key was to the Devourer King, as well as the shocking scene in the ice tower, he knew that the spacetime temple was definitely not simple. Zhuowen took out the white spacetime key again and planned to study it carefully. After all, he planned to look for the 2nd spacetime key on the map given to him by the Devourer King. Naturally, he had to memorize the appearance of the spacetime key. However, the moment he took out the spacetime key, he was stunned. His eyes became dull. Countless cracks appeared on the surface of the spacetime key in his hand. In the end, it exploded with a bang. Countless white powder drifted in the air. Chapter 2236. Seeing Tong Chimay again, Zhuowen's gaze flickered as he rushed out of the pocket dimension's exit. Tang Wuying and the other 2 were guarding the entrance. When they saw Zhuowen come out, all of them had reserved expressions and bowed respectfully. "Did you see a fatty come out just now?" Zhuowen asked with a gloomy gaze. Tang Wuying's heart trembled when he saw Zhuowen's unfriendly tone. He hurriedly said, "Sir, there was indeed a fatty who came out just now. He called himself Lord Fatty and said he was your best brother. Moreover, he was very powerful, so Zhuowen didn't say anything. Instead, he released his enormous divine sense and radiated it towards the surrounding starry sky. The moment Tang Wuying, Tang Wuzong, and Tang Wuxi felt this surge of divine sense, their bodies trembled and their faces turned deathly pale. They secretly complained in their hearts. They didn't expect Zhuowen's divine sense to be so terrifying. If their divine sense was a small stream, then Zhuowen's divine sense was a vast ocean. The 2 weren't on the same level at all. After about an hour, Zhuowen withdrew his divine sense and sighed in his heart. He knew that with the fatty's speed, he had probably left the danger zone. However, he was still unwilling to give up. "Hand over the complete map and you can scram." Zhuowen spread his hands at Tang Wuying and the other 2 and said coldly. Tang Wuying hurriedly nodded. After handing over a jade slip, he hurriedly left with Tang Wuzong and Tang Wuxi. Zhuowen's divine sense scanned the contents of the jade slip. Shortly after, he stomped his right foot and left the place. At the exit of the danger zone, Zhuowen slowly stepped out. He looked at the normal starry sky in front of him. He knew that he had finally left the danger zone behind. Although he had obtained the ice source energy and plundered a lot of resources from the pocket dimension, in his opinion, these couldn't be compared to a spacetime key. "Damn fatty, don't let me see him in the future. If I do, I'll definitely not let him go." Zhuowen was very unhappy when he thought about how that damn fatty had used a fake key to deceive him. This was the first time he had suffered such a big loss. However, the fat man's methods were indeed impressive. He was actually able to tamper with the fake key and create spacetime energy. This was truly beyond Zhuowen's expectations. Although the white spacetime divine key had been snatched away by the fatso, Zhuowen still had clues about the other spacetime divine key. If he could obtain this spacetime divine key, he would be able to enter the spacetime wilderness. At that time, his chances of encountering that damned fatty would be much higher. After all, 3 spacetime keys were required to open the temporal temple. That damned fatty had only 1 spacetime key, so he couldn't enter the temporal temple at all. Thinking of this, Zhuowen was eager to find the 2nd spacetime key marked on the map. Of course, he still did not know the exact location of the map's endpoint. He had to make a trip to the Half-Moon Hall first. The Half-Moon Hall was formed by several galaxies. From afar, it looked like a half-moon, which was quite fitting for the name Half-Moon Hall. The half-moon-shaped galaxies revolved around the Half-Moon Hall in the center. Without a doubt, the Half-Moon Hall was the core and ruler of this galaxy. After Zhuowen entered the galaxy, he did not encounter any checks. However, when he arrived at the mainland where the half-moon hall was located, he was stopped outside. The guard at the entrance looked at Zhuowen with hostility and said coldly, "Who are you? What business do you have in the half-moon hall?" Zhuowen was helpless. Just as he was about to take out the token that Han Yang had given him, a surprised voice suddenly came from behind him. "Brother Zhuo? Is it really you?" Zhuowen turned his head and saw a beautiful lady dressed in a moon-white robe looking at him in surprise. Zhuowen smiled and said, "Chimei, long time no see." The lady who had called out Zhuowen's name was the half-moon hall's genius, Tong Chimei. At this moment, Tong Chimei was accompanied by a handsome young man with a fair complexion. When the handsome young man saw Tong Chimei affectionately calling out to this unfamiliar man as Brother Zhuo, he subconsciously frowned. Tong Chimei immediately abandoned the handsome young man beside her and came in front of Zhuo Wen. She sized Zhuo Wen up from head to toe and said with a charming smile, "I knew Big Brother Zhuo would be fine. Did you come to the half-moon hall to look for someone?" When she said this, Tong Chimei's beautiful eyes curved into crescents. Anyone could see the joy in her eyes. Zhuo Wen nodded. Just as he was about to say that he was here to look for Elder Han Yang, Tong Chimei hurriedly grabbed Zhuo Wen's arm and said with a smile, "Big Brother Zhuo, it's rare for you to come to Half Moon Hall. Come in and have a seat. Let Chimei entertain you properly." After she said this, Tong Chimei pulled Zhuowen into the Half Moon Hall without any explanation. When the guards at the entrance saw that it was Tong Chimei who had brought someone in, they naturally did not dare to say anything and quickly let them in. However, the handsome young man who had been forgotten by Tong Chimei had a gloomy look in his eyes. Especially when he saw Tong Chimei pulling Zhuowen's arm so passionately, the flames of anger in his heart surged. Previously, he had spoken kindly to Tong Chimei and had even given her many resources as gifts. However, Tong Chimei had never smiled at him. However, now that an unfamiliar man had suddenly appeared and Tong Chimei's attitude was so warm, the flames of jealousy in the handsome young man's heart burned fiercely. Where did this little bastard come from? He actually made Chimei so warm. Could it be that Chimei likes this little bastard? The handsome young man silently watched as Zhuowen and Tong Chimei walked into the distance. He did not chase after them but stood on the spot thinking about something. After thinking for a long time, the handsome young man realized that this Zhuowen did not match any of the young talents he could think of. He knew that this stranger was definitely a nobody. If it was an extremely famous genius who was pursuing Tong Chimei, he would feel slightly better. However, this unfamiliar young man in front of him was a nobody. The handsome young man was extremely angry and displeased. However, very quickly, the handsome young man's lips curled into a cold arc and he entered the Half Moon Hall. The Lake Moon Inn was Tong Chimei's dwelling within the Half Moon Hall. Chapter 2237. Framing Tong Chimei also realized that she had asked too many questions. She awkwardly stroked the bun on her temples, but there was a different kind of charm to her. It had to be said that Tong Chimei was indeed a rare beauty. She was not inferior to Mu Chunxue at all. Moreover, although she appeared cold on the surface, Zhuowen realized that Tong Chimei was quite easy to get along with after getting to know her better. "Big Brother Zhuo, am I asking too many questions?" Tong Chimei asked weakly. Zhuowen smiled and said, "Chimei, I know you have a lot of questions. Let me tell you one by one." Although Zhuowen and Tong Chimei had not interacted for long, Tong Chimei had helped him a lot in the past. Therefore, Zhuowen had a good impression of this woman who was cold on the outside but warm on the inside. Next, Zhuo Wen briefly recounted his experience. Of course, he skipped over some things that were related to his own secrets and didn't go into too much detail. After Zhuowen finished, Tong Chimei rested her chin on her hands and looked at Zhuowen in a daze. There was a rare look of adoration in her eyes. Zhuowen could not resist Tong Chimei's gaze and hurriedly said, "Chimei, I came to the Half Moon Hall this time for an important matter. Big Brother Zhuo, tell me, what is it? If I can help you, I will definitely help you." Tong Chimei regained her senses and said generously. Zhuowen pondered for a moment and said in a deep voice, "It's like this. I heard that Yuezu of the Half Moon Hall has the star map of the 8 heavens on him." Tong Chimei was taken aback. She immediately nodded and said, Grandmaster does indeed have the star map of the 8 heavens. However, the star map is a little incomplete. Moreover, this star map is extremely important to Grandmaster. Big Brother Zhuo, do you intend to borrow that star map? Tong Chimei's beautiful eyes turned slightly. She was originally very intelligent. Now that Zhuowen asked this question, she immediately guessed Zhuowen's purpose. Zhuowen didn't hide it and said, Yes, I have a map on me, but I don't know which heaven this map belongs to, so I have to compare it with the star charts of the 8 heavens. Tong Chimei's beautiful eyes flickered as she said, Big Brother Zhuo, I'll help you think of a way. Zhuowen looked at Tong Chimei suspiciously. Chimei, didn't you say that the star chart was extremely important to the Yuezhu? I think it will be very difficult for you to borrow it. Don't worry, I still have a way. Before Zhuowen could finish speaking, he was interrupted by Tong Chimei. Tong Chimei said in a rare serious tone, Big Brother Zhuo, you helped me so much in the past, but Chimei didn't help much. Chimei has always felt guilty about it. This time, Big Brother Zhuo, you have a favor to ask of me. If I can't help you, Chimei won't have the face to see you again. Big Brother Zhuo, don't worry, Grandmaster is very good to me. When the time comes, I'll find a way to borrow the star chart from Grandmaster. Zhuowen looked at the serious expression on Tong Chimei's face and shook his head helplessly. Chimei, you're exaggerating. You did your best back then and helped me a lot. You don't owe me anything. Tong Chimei shook her head and said seriously, Big Brother Zhuo, let me try first. If I can borrow it, you won't have to trouble others. Hearing this, Zhuowen could only nod. He knew that this was Tong Chimei's good intentions, and he didn't want to disappoint her. Seeing that Zhuowen agreed, Tong Chimei was very happy. Just as she was about to say something, her beautiful eyes narrowed and she took out her communication jade charm. Tong Chimei's communication jade charm was flashing. Clearly, someone was sending her a message. Tong Chimei glanced at it and said apologetically to Zhuowen, Big Brother Zhuo, my master sent me a message. It seems that I have to make a trip. Don't worry, I might be able to find a way to borrow the star chart of the 8 heavens for you. Zhuowen smiled faintly and said, You go first. Tong Chimei nodded and left a few more instructions before leaving the cave dwelling. In the spacious cave dwelling, Zhuowen sat quietly by the table. He silently looked at the jade token in his hand. This jade token was given to him by Tong Chimei, and it was the key to Tong Chimei's cave dwelling. With this jade token, Zhuowen could freely enter and exit Tong Chimei's cave dwelling. Zhuowen shook his head, thinking that Tong Chimei trusted him too much. She even personally gave him the key to the cave dwelling. Keeping the jade token, Zhuowen thought for a while and decided to leave the cave dwelling. Although Tong Chimei said that she would definitely help him borrow the star chart of the 8 heavens, he knew that although Tong Chimei was a genius of the half-moon hall, her qualifications were not enough to borrow the star chart from the Yuezhu. For this matter, he had to find Han Yang. After all, Han Yang was the supreme elder of the half-moon hall and held a high position. Even the Yuezhu would give Han Yang face. Thinking of this, Zhuowen left Tong Chimei's cave dwelling. Outside Tong Chimei's cave dwelling, there was a large and elegant garden. Zhuowen was unfamiliar with the half-moon hall and naturally would not wander around. He took out the identity token that Han Yang had given him and sent a message on it. Then, he strolled around the garden. Han Yang's identity token naturally had a communication function. As long as he arrived at the half-moon hall and sent a message to Han Yang would know immediately. Zhuowen believed that Han Yang would arrive here soon. When Zhuowen walked into a peach blossom forest, he suddenly heard a soft moan coming from the peach blossom forest in front of him. Zhuowen used his divine sense to scan the area and immediately saw a scene of naked bodies. In his divine sense, he saw a pair of young men doing despicable things. From their clothes, he could tell that they were disciples of the half-moon hall. However, the half-moon hall was after all the leader of the 10 great sects. Why would there be disciples doing such things in the garden? This made Zhuowen speechless. Zhuowen did not continue to use his divine sense to investigate. Although there was an array in the garden that blocked out divine sense, Zhuowen's divine sense was extremely powerful and naturally would not be suppressed. After retracting his divine sense, Zhuowen took a detour and went in the opposite direction of the couple. However, Zhuowen soon realized that something was wrong. He realized that there were dense footsteps coming from the peach blossom forest. Zhuowen had not taken many steps when more than 20 figures appeared around him and surrounded him. What is the meaning of this? Zhuowen looked at the clothes of the 20 people and realized that they were all disciples of the Half-Moon Hall. What is the meaning of this? You insulted our junior sister. What do you think we are doing? The leader was a dignified man in white. At this moment, he was holding a long sword and looking coldly at Zhuowen as he hooted. Zhuowen looked at the man in white and sneered in his heart. Wasn't this man the man of the pair of man and woman that he had sensed with his divine sense earlier? Now, this man actually had the face to stand out and accuse him of insulting his junior sister. This man's skin was a little too thick. Although Zhuowen didn't know what was going on, he naturally guessed that someone was trying to frame him. Although this method was very low-end, it was impossible to use divine sense in this place. Using this kind of framing method, and then immediately killing the person who was framing him, there would be no evidence. Chapter 2238. Senior brother G, you have no evidence. Why do you say that I humiliated your junior sister? Zhuowen sneered. The white-clothed man was not in a hurry. He looked behind him and a woman in messy clothes slowly walked out. Zhuowen was not unfamiliar with this woman. It was the woman who had intercourse with the white-clothed man in the depths of the peach forest. At this moment, the woman looked at the white-clothed man timidly. Her legs were weak. The white-clothed man waved at the woman and said, "Junior sister Yuan, come here." The woman's beautiful eyes revealed a trace of panic, but she still obediently came to the white-clothed man's side. "Junior apprentice sister Yuan, is this guy the one who insulted you?" As the white-clothed man spoke, he pointed at Zhuowen and said meaningfully. The woman glanced at Zhuowen, then turned her head away and did not say anything. The white-clothed man narrowed his eyes. His right hand grabbed the woman's jade-like arm and he raised his voice. "Junior sister Yuan, don't be afraid. We are all here. As long as you give up the person who humiliated you, everything will be fine." The woman's expression changed slightly. Her delicate body trembled. She pointed at Zhuowen and did not say anything. Seeing the woman's action, the surrounding 20 or so disciples were all furious. They stared at Zhuowen with fire in their eyes. "Beast, an outsider actually dares to be so presumptuous in our Half-Moon Hall. How dare he insult junior sister Yuan? This person deserves to die. If we don't kill such a reckless person, it will be hard to convince the masses." Immediately, the condemnation was like a wave, one wave higher than the other. The white-clothed man let go of the woman, then stared coldly at Zhuowen and said, "Outsider, although I don't know how you entered the Half-Moon Hall, but you have done such an outrageous thing, which is already disgraceful. Now, I will give you a chance. If you surrender immediately, I might be lenient with you." Zhuowen could not be bothered to talk nonsense with these 20-odd disciples. The strongest among them was the white-clothed man, whose cultivation was only at the 4th step of the illusory sky realm. In front of him, they were like ants. Although he didn't know why the man in white wanted to frame him, he really didn't want to care about it. Boom. At this moment, Zhuowen did not hold back his aura at all. In just an instant, the peach trees in the peach forest shook violently. Peach blossoms fell like rain in all directions, forming a gorgeous storm. Plop, plop. Under such a terrifying aura, all the disciples surrounding Zhuowen, except for the white-robed man, knelt on the ground. Even the white-robed man was barely able to support his body. He was trembling and seemed to be having a hard time. At this moment, the white-robed man was shocked. He didn't expect this outsider's strength to be so terrifying. Just the aura released by this outsider had probably reached the 5th level of the void sky realm. Senior brother G clearly said that this person was just a nobody, so his strength shouldn't be very strong. How could? The white-robed man's heart grew more and more fearful. Zhuowen slowly walked in front of the white-robed man and lifted his chin with his right hand. He coldly said, "Who ordered you to do this?" Zhuowen was very clear that this white-robed man was so weak. Moreover, He had never even seen this white-robed man before. Someone must have ordered him to do this. The white-robed man's body trembled. He bit his lips tightly and did not intend to reveal the mastermind behind this. The white-robed man was very clear that this person was definitely nothing compared to young Master Ji. If he revealed young Master Ji, he would definitely die. After all, this person was an outsider. He did not believe that this person would dare to start a massacre here. After all, the Half Moon Hall's strength was well known in the entire starfield. Not going to speak. Zhuowen was a little surprised by this white-robed man's stubbornness. However, the surprise in his eyes soon turned into a terrifying killing intent. He also lifted the white-robed man up. Do you think that I don't dare to kill in the Half Moon Hall? Is that why you're so fearless? Zhuowen said indifferently. The white-robed man hurriedly said, I am a disciple of the Half Moon Hall. You can't kill me. Once you kill me, you will completely offend the Half Moon Hall. I think you know the consequences better than I do. The sneer on Zhuowen's face grew wider. Back then, he dared to destroy the Dark Mirage sect, High Heaven sect and the other 10 great sects alone. Although the Half Moon Hall was powerful, Zhuowen's strength was also much stronger than before. Although he might not have the ability to fight against the entire Half Moon Hall alone, it was almost impossible for the Half Moon Hall to keep him here. Speaking of which, he was not afraid of the Half Moon Hall at all. Stop! A cold voice suddenly rang out. Zhuowen stomped his right foot and flung the white-robed man backwards. Asterisk bang! Asterisk a strong collision sound rang out, followed by a blood-curdling scream from the white-robed man. He fell to the ground and was on the verge of death. Zhuowen turned around and looked behind him, only to see 2 streaks of light flying over from the sky. Just now, one of the streaks of light had launched a terrifying attack. Zhuowen had sensed it, so he did not hesitate to throw the white-robed man out as a shield. Asterisk Su. Asterisk 2 streaks of light landed near the white-robed man. Zhuowen was not unfamiliar with one of the 2 people. It was actually the handsome young man who had entered the Half Moon Palace together with Tong Chimei when Zhuowen entered the Half Moon Palace. The other person was a black-robed old man who was as thin as a skeleton. Moreover, the aura of this black-robed old man was not weak. He was actually a 6th-step Void Sky Master. Junior brother Chen, what's going on? The handsome young man came to the white-robed man's side and immediately took out a crystal-clear divine pill from his spirit ring and fed it to the white-robed man. Zhuowen could clearly see that it was a level 5 healing divine pill, the 5 Qi restoring divine pill. It had a very powerful healing effect. It had to be said that this handsome young man was really rich. He could take out a level 5 divine pill just like that. It seemed like this handsome young man's position in the Half Moon Hall was not low. Senior brother Ji, you're finally here. This outsider is too much. Not only did he humiliate junior sister Yuan, when we wanted to capture him to confess his crimes, he relied on his powerful cultivation and actually injured us. If senior brother Ji did not come in time, he would have killed me. He's really too hateful. After the white-robed man recovered some of his strength, he immediately started to complain tearfully. He exaggerated Zhuowen's crimes to the extreme, as if Zhuowen's crimes were too numerous to be recorded. His crimes were extremely heinous. A mere 6th-step Void Sky brat actually dares to behave so atrociously in the Half Moon Hall. Who let you enter the Half Moon Hall? What's your purpose? Senior brother Ji put down the white-robed man and looked at Zhuowen with resentment. He then said to the skinny old man beside him, Elder Fu, not only did this person humiliate our Half Moon Hall's junior sister, he also maliciously injured a disciple. Now, he's even more overbearing. If we don't kill this kind of person, how can we convince the others? Zhuowen watched all of this in silence, especially that senior brother Ji's face. He had already guessed that the person who wanted to deal with him should be this senior brother Ji. Chapter 2239. Eruption Nephew Ji is right. You are too arrogant. You should know that this is the Half Moon Hall. Your Void Sky 6 steps cultivation is nothing here. You should obediently be captured and await your punishment. The skinny old man placed his hands behind his back and looked at Zhuowen indifferently. Obviously, in his opinion, although this young man's cultivation was not bad, it was insignificant in the half-moon hall where experts were as common as clouds. After the skinny old man finished speaking, 3 streaks of light flew over from afar and finally arrived at the peach forest. These 3 people were also old men who were over 70 years old. The one leading them was a red-faced old man. The red-faced old man looked at the skinny old man and frowned. What's going on? What happened here? These 3 old men's strength was not ordinary. They were all Void Sky 6 steps and should be elders of the Half-Moon Hall. The skinny old man briefly explained the situation, and the red-faced old man's and the other 2's gazes immediately became unfriendly. This is simply a heinous crime and an affront to public decency. The red-faced old man glared and waved his right hand. His divine energy condensed into a giant hand and directly grabbed at Zhuowen. Senior brother Ji stood at the back and sneered at this scene. Although he was surprised that Zhuowen's cultivation was so high, he knew that Zhuowen was finished. Not to mention that there were 4 Void Sky 6 steps elders here. Just the crime of framing Zhuowen was enough to make this guy a rat that everyone in the Half-Moon Hall wanted to beat up. Trying to snatch my woman, you are simply courting death. Senior brother Ji sneered in his heart. The red-faced old man's divine energy giant hand was extremely fast and arrived in front of Zhuowen in an instant. Zhuowen stood still. His right hand formed into a claw and fiercely clenched. Instantly, the red-faced old man's divine energy giant hand was stopped in its tracks. Then, Zhuowen exerted force and the red-faced old man's expression changed slightly. He felt his body become lighter and he involuntarily fell towards Zhuowen. Then, under everyone's gaze, he fell flat on his face. The scene suddenly became much quieter. The other 3 elders' faces stiffened, and senior brother Ji's body trembled. As for the 20 or so disciples, they were all stunned on the spot as they stared blankly at the red-faced old man who had fallen flat on his face. Although they knew that this unfamiliar young man's strength was also at the 6th step of the Void Sky Realm, the red-faced old man was also at the 6th step of the Void Sky Realm. Moreover, he was the strongest of the 4, having reached the peak of the 6th step of the Void Sky Realm. Originally, they thought that the unfamiliar young man would definitely be at a disadvantage when the red-faced old man attacked. However, they did not expect that the young man would make the powerful red-faced old man fall flat on his face with just a grab. This was beyond everyone's expectations. The red-faced old man's face turned even redder. He hurriedly stood up and retreated to the side of the 3 elders. He looked at Zhuowen in horror. Just now, this young man had only stretched out his hand and clasped it, and he had fallen to the ground without any resistance. This was really unbelievable to him, and he didn't even dare to imagine what kind of powerful strength was needed to do this. Elder Miao, what's wrong with you? Just now. The skinny old man immediately asked when he saw the red-faced old man retreat to his side. Although he knew that this might have been caused by the unfamiliar young man, he subconsciously felt that it was impossible for the unfamiliar young man to do it, so he asked this question. The 3 of you, this child is not simple. It's best to be careful. The red-faced old man said solemnly. At this moment, Zhuowen spoke again. Everyone, the matter of the insult is completely false. I hope that the 4 of you can be impartial and not slander a good person. A thief calling a thief. These people are all witnesses, and now you're saying that we're slandering you. Do you think we're fools? Senior brother Ji, who was standing behind the 4 elders, sneered and mocked. Zhuowen's eyes were cold and sharp. He stomped his right foot, and his right hand moved like lightning. Surging divine power transformed into a huge hand that suddenly grabbed at senior brother Ji. He was sure that this senior martial brother Ji was the one who came up with the scheme to frame him. You dare! The skinny old man roared angrily. He also condensed a huge hand of divine power and blasted it out. At the same time, he transmitted his voice to the red-faced old man and his 2 companions and attacked together. He naturally saw the red-faced old man's miserable state just now. He knew that facing this young man alone was simply asking for a beating, so naturally, he had to ask for help. The red-faced old man and his 2 companions naturally wouldn't refuse. Although the red-faced old man didn't gain any advantage from Zhuowen, it didn't mean that the four of them weren't a match for Zhuowen even if they joined forces. 4 huge hands of divine power blasted out at the same time, like 4 angry dragons, whistling out. The entire peach blossom forest was set off a terrifying peach blossom storm. The surrounding disciples, including senior brother Ji, all retreated to a certain distance and watched everything with solemn eyes. Senior brother Ji, isn't this person too strong? Didn't you say that this person was a nobody? The white-robed man standing beside senior brother Ji said with some dissatisfaction. Senior brother Ji sneered and said, "You dare to question me? If I didn't protect you, do you think you could cover up your scandal?" The white-robed man's expression changed slightly and he hurriedly said, "Junior brother doesn't dare." Senior brother Ji nodded and immediately looked at the battlefield and said, "This person is indeed not simple. However, with 4 elders joining forces, how long can he jump around? Moreover, my grandfather will be here soon. Where can this person escape to?" Hearing senior brother Ji mention his grandfather, the white-robed man's neck shrank. Senior brother Ji's grandfather was the law-enforcing elder of Half Moon Hall. He was very powerful and had a cultivation of Void Sky Stage 7. He was in charge of the laws of Half Moon Hall. If anyone in Half Moon Hall broke the law-enforcing elder was the most cold-blooded and merciless person and would not tolerate it. This unfamiliar young man had the crime of humiliating a female disciple. The law-enforcing elder would not let him go. It was even possible that he would be executed on the spot as a warning to others. Bang! At this moment, the 4 huge hands of the skinny old man and his companions blasted onto Zhuowen's huge hands of divine power. The terrifying aftershock of the collision caused a large area of space to distort. Fortunately, this garden was set up with a powerful array. Therefore, although the collision of the 5 people was very powerful, most of the impact was neutralized by the array. Zhuowen silently looked at the 4 elders who blocked his huge hands of divine power. His expression did not change as he said indifferently, "I have no intention of becoming enemies with you. However, since you want a yard after taking an inch, don't blame me for being impolite." As he said this, Zhuowen clenched his right hand and the huge hands of divine power clenched into a fist and smashed down. Instantly, the 4 huge hands of divine power were smashed into pieces by this fist. Zhuowen knew that he was currently in the territory of Half Moon Hall. Here, even if he was framed by senior brother Ji, the people of Half Moon Hall would definitely not believe an outsider like him and suspect a disciple of Half Moon Hall. Even if this matter was really done by the Half Moon Hall, the 4 elders would still think of ways to push the blame onto Zhuowen and make him a scapegoat to cover up the scandal of Half Moon Hall. Therefore, no matter what, he would definitely not be able to escape from being framed. Therefore, Zhuowen could not bear it and directly crushed them with thunderous means. Bang bang bang. Chapter 2240. Your blood grandpa. The moment the 4 elders were sent flying, Zhuowen's giant hand made a beeline for senior brother Ji like a hot knife through butter. Senior brother Ji's expression changed greatly. With a low roar, he took out the jade pendant from his waist and dripped a drop of fresh blood on it. Instantly, a blazing and terrifying light burst out in all directions, forming a powerful protective barrier in front of senior brother Ji. Bang! The divine palm instantly blasted over. Senior brother Ji was sent flying in an extremely sorry state and landed several hundred meters away. However, Zhuowen looked at the jade pendant in front of senior brother Ji in astonishment. The energy barrier released by the jade pendant was indeed terrifying. Although Zhuowen's divine palm wasn't at his full strength, its power was still incomparable. Moreover, senior brother Ji's cultivation was only at the 4th step of the Void Sky realm. Generally speaking, it was impossible for him to survive under Zhuowen's divine palm. However, the energy released by senior brother Ji's jade pendant was so terrifying that it blocked Zhuowen's divine palm. Little bastard, do you really think you're invincible? Not only did you insult our Half Moon Hall's junior sister, you even want to kill us. You're simply despicable and shameless. Just you wait, my grandfather is the enforcement elder. He'll be here soon and you'll be dead for sure. Senior brother Ji crawled up in a sorry state. There was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. It seemed that although he had relied on the power of the jade pendant to block Zhuo Wen's divine hand, the recoil from it was still quite terrifying. Zhuo was too lazy to pay attention to senior brother Ji. He stretched out his right hand again. This time, he poured out all of his divine palm. It was unknown how much more terrifying the divine palm was than before. Bang! Senior brother Ji was sent flying again. He spat out a large mouthful of blood. His face was pale and there were cracks on the jade pendant in his hand. Senior brother Ji's eyes were filled with fear. This jade pendant was a protective talisman given to him by his grandfather. Cultivators below the 7th step of the Void Sky Realm would find it difficult to break through the jade pendant's defense. However, Zhuo almost broke it. Zhuowen's eyes were cold. He blasted out the divine palm again. He knew that senior brother Ji's jade pendant wouldn't be able to withstand his attack. However, just as Zhuowen's divine power giant hand was about to strike, a cold snort came from the sky. Then, a giant hand that was no weaker than Zhuowen's divine power giant hand came crashing down like a mountain. The two large hands collided, and countless storms shot out. Soon after, both of them collapsed into nothingness. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed as he raised his head to look at the sky. He saw an old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion slowly walking over and landing in front of senior brother Ji. "Grandpa," senior brother Ji said excitedly. "Elder of law enforcement." The 4 elders and the remaining 20 or so disciples who had been repelled by Zhuo all bowed respectfully to the white-haired old man who had just arrived. The white-haired old man nodded his head slightly. Then, he looked at the cracked jade pendant in senior brother Ji's hand. A cold glint flashed across his eyes as he asked coldly, "Who did this?" "It's this boy. This boy isn't a disciple of our half-moon hall. However, he dared to humiliate junior sister Yuan in our half-moon hall. Not only that, he even injured our senior and junior brothers. Relying on his high cultivation level, he acted recklessly and didn't put our half-moon hall in his eyes at all," senior brother Ji quickly said. "Is what he said true?" The white-haired, ruddy-faced old man ignored Zhuo and instead looked at the 4 elders as he asked. The skinny old man hurriedly said, "Disciplinary elder, nephew Ji is right. This kid has indeed insulted the female disciples of our sect. This matter is known to all 20 of us here. The 4 of us originally planned to capture him, but unfortunately, this kid used despicable means to defeat us." So, Zhuo sneered in his heart as he watched everything silently. He knew that these people were just putting on an act. Their goal was to pin a crime on him so that their sect master wouldn't reprimand him if he was captured. The old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion nodded slightly. Finally, his gaze landed on Zhuo. An unprecedented killing intent suddenly erupted, firmly locking onto Zhuo. "Do you know your crime? Now, you have a chance to kill yourself in front of me. I won't investigate you and I won't implicate your friends and family," the white-haired old man said arrogantly. Zhuo narrowed his eyes. This elder of law enforcement's cultivation level was only around Void Sky 7 steps. In front of him, Zhuo, he actually acted so high and mighty. Zhuo really didn't know what this guy was thinking. "Not interested," Zhuo replied indifferently. The white-haired old man grinned. His eyes revealed a cruel expression as he said, "Then you're courting death." With that, the white-haired old man made his move. Unfortunately, Zhuo was even faster than him. A giant hand made of divine power had already arrived in front of the white-haired old man. The white-haired old man was both shocked and furious. With a low roar, he also blasted out a giant hand made of divine power. When the two collided, the white-haired old man revealed a look of shock. He actually retreated dozens of steps in the collision. The moment he stabilized his body, a bloody light swept past his feet like a comet. Poochie. The white-haired old man was caught off guard. His calves were immediately cut off by the bloody light and he fell to the ground in a sorry state. Moreover, the white-haired old man discovered that the wound that was cut off by the bloody light was extremely corrosive. When he wanted to use his divine power to regenerate his legs, he discovered that the recovery was extremely slow, like a snail. Whoosh! The bloody light flashed and disappeared, falling around Zhuowen. Only then did the crowd realize that the bloody light was actually a bloody sword. "My lord, what do you think of my move?" The Blood Immortal smirked slightly proudly and asked Zhuowen for praise. Zhuowen nodded and said, "Not bad." Although it was only a 2-word evaluation, the Blood Immortal was still overjoyed. He had been following Zhuowen for a long time. It could be said that he didn't have much time to contribute. After all, Zhuowen's strength had always been much stronger than his, so he didn't need to use him. However, since he followed Xiao He and became a weapon cultivator, his good days had come. Not only did his strength increase day by day, but it was also very fast. Now, his strength was comparable to the peak of Void Sky 7th step. It was a little difficult for him to kill the law-enforcing elder, but it was more than enough for a sneak attack. The white-haired old man fell from heaven to hell. Clearly, he hadn't reacted yet. He was stunned on the spot. Senior Brother Ji, the 4 elders, and the others who wanted the law-enforcing elder to stand up for them were also stunned. They didn't expect the law-enforcing elder's legs to be cut off so easily. At this moment, including Senior Brother Ji, there was finally a trace of fear for the young man in front of him. Whoosh! Senior Brother Ji was the first to react. He immediately flew into the distance. Unfortunately, the Blood Immortal sword was much faster than him. Boom! The Blood Immortal sword caught up with Senior Brother Ji. With only one slash, the Blood Immortal sword shattered Senior Brother Ji's protective shield. Then, with another slash, Senior Brother Ji's legs were cut off. He fell from the sky and fell to the ground with a bloody nose and a swollen face. "Trash, Void Sky 4th step, keep running. If you keep running, I'll cut off your 3rd leg too." Chapter 2241. "Han Yang, bring him here," Zhuowen said calmly. The Blood Immortal sword's body trembled. Then, it smiled at Zhuowen. With a flick of the sword, it lifted Senior Brother Ji up and brought him to Zhuowen. Zhuowen lifted Senior Apprentice Brother Ji with his right hand and poured out his powerful divine power. Senior Apprentice Brother Ji couldn't even struggle. He could only watch as Zhuowen lifted him up. At the same time, the man in white who had framed him earlier, seeing that the law enforcement elder and Senior Brother Ji had both been defeated, rolled his eyes and began to slowly retreat, intending to slip away. Unfortunately, the Blood Immortal sword was 1 step ahead and cut off the man's legs. Then, it carried him over. Junior Sister Yuan, who had been humiliated, was in the crowd. Her beautiful eyes were filled with pleasure. Zhuowen turned around and looked at Junior Sister Yuan. The latter's beautiful eyes were filled with fear. She could not help but take a few steps back. "Junior Sister Yuan, don't be afraid. Come out. These people can't threaten you now. Now you can tell me the truth. Did I humiliate you?" Zhuowen looked at Junior Sister Yuan. Previously, when the white-robed man brought up this Junior Sister Yuan, he knew that this Junior Sister Yuan was most likely threatened and forced. Junior Sister Yuan looked at the man in white and Senior Brother Ji. She lowered her head and did not speak. Zhuowen did not intend to play games with this Junior Apprentice Sister Yuan. A terrifying divine sense suddenly invaded her soul. Junior Sister Yuan raised her head. Her eyes were filled with confusion. She murmured, "It was Senior Brother Chen who drugged me and humiliated me. Then he led his fellow disciples to surround this strange young man. He threatened me to identify him as the one who had humiliated me. I could not resist. I could only listen to Senior Brother Chen." The 4 elders who had been filled with righteous indignation were shocked. They looked at the man in white in disbelief. Zhuowen withdrew his divine thought. Junior Sister Yuan also regained her consciousness. Zhuowen looked at the man in white and said, "I see. You were the one who called me a thief. For elders, I have no intention to be enemies with the Half-Moon Hall. However, I, Zhuowen, will not casually put on a scapegoat. I hope the 4 of you can see through this." As he spoke, Zhuowen looked at the 4 elders. The 4 of them knew how powerful he was and would definitely not act rashly. In addition, now that the truth had been revealed, he knew that the 4 of them had no reason to capture him. "Chen Rongyo, you've got guts. You actually dared to insult your junior sister from the same sect. Moreover, you even threatened to frame her. You've simply thrown away the face of our half-moon hall. The skinny elder among the 4 elders was raged. He was Rongi's hand formed with divine power, and slammed it towards the man in white. There was no mercy. He didn't hold back at all in this attack, and it was enough to completely kill the white-robed man. Zhuowen sneered. With a wave of his sleeve, the skinny elder's divine power dissipated. I say, Elder, although this person wants to frame me, I don't know this person. This person has no motive to frame me at all. It can only be said that he was ordered by someone. Why are you in such a hurry to kill him? Zhuowen looked at the skinny elder. Then, he looked down at the man in white and said, Tell me who ordered you. The white-robed man's entire body was trembling. Just now, the skinny old man's attack had really intended to kill him. He could deeply feel the white-robed man's killing intent, and he also knew that this skinny old man was one of Senior Brother G's people. Although Senior Brother G was the mastermind, he knew that he would definitely die if he exposed Senior Brother G. No one ordered me to do it. I did it alone. The man in white raised his head and looked at Zhuowen with determination. Zhuowen furrowed his brows and looked at the man in white in surprise. This guy's temper was quite stubborn. He still hadn't revealed Senior Brother G. Just as Zhuowen was about to use some tricks, a streamer flew over and landed in the sky above the peach forest. The streamer disappeared and revealed 2 figures. One of them was a beautiful woman and the other was a middle-aged man with a dignified expression. Zhuowen was no stranger to these 2 people. They were Lin Shipping and Han Yang, whom he had met in the starry sky fault. When the 2 of them parted ways with Zhuowen, they naturally returned to the half-moon hall. This time, Zhuowen came to look for Han Yang. Grand Elder. In the peach forest, the 4 elders and the other disciples all knelt on one knee. Their eyes were filled with respect. This was the Grand Elder, the second strongest expert in the half-moon hall. His cultivation had reached the peak of the 8 steps void sky. Although he had only recently returned to the half-moon hall, the sect master still passed the position of Grand Elder to Han Yang. Speaking of which, the previous Grand Elder was the current Enforcement Elder. He was the white-haired old man who had been sneak-attacked by the Blood Celestial Sword. At this moment, the Enforcement Elder's legs had finally recovered. He looked at Han Yang and said in a deep voice, Grand Elder, this person has no respect for the law and is audacious. Not only did he humiliate the female disciples of the Half-Moon Hall, he also injured many disciples. I implore Grand Elder to arrest this person. The rest of the people in the Peach Forest followed the Enforcement Elder and shouted in unison. Naturally, they wanted Han Yang to arrest Zhuowen and interrogate him. Senior Brother G, who had been grabbed by the neck by Zhuowen, heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. The Grand Elder was the second strongest expert in the Half-Moon Hall. He was considered a top expert in the entire starfield. He knew that this kid in front of him was no match for the Grand Elder. This time, Zhuowen would definitely be taught a lesson. Slap. Unfortunately, just as the Enforcement Elder finished speaking, he was slapped to the ground. His face was extremely red and a bright handprint appeared on it. It was extremely eye-catching. Everyone was stunned and looked at Han Yang, who had just arrived, in disbelief. They were extremely puzzled. Why did the Taishang Elder suddenly attack the Law Enforcement Elder? Everyone clearly didn't know what was going on. Senior Brother G, who had been pleased with himself, was also stunned. He looked at Han Yang strangely and did not understand what Han Yang meant by doing this. Grand Elder, you. What are you doing? The Enforcement Elder was completely stunned and could not help but roar out in anger. Unfortunately, as soon as Elder of Law Enforcement finished speaking, he was met with another slap on his face. Slap. The Enforcement Elder was once again slapped to the ground. His entire body trembled and his bones seemed to have fallen apart. Let me tell you why I slapped you. Han Yang's gaze was cold as he pointed at Zhuowen and said, his name is Zhuowen. He is the Zhuowen who once destroyed the Dark Mirage sect, High Heaven sect, Heaven and Earth sect, Clear Void Peak, and Demon Pearl sect. He is also my savior. No matter what mistake he has made, it is not up to you to criticize him. As soon as Han Yang said this, the peach forest fell into a strange silence. Everyone looked at Zhuowen in disbelief. Chapter 2242. The result: the law enforcement elder was completely dumbfounded, especially when he heard Han Yang's words. His head exploded as he stood rooted to the ground. How could he not have heard of Zhuowen's name? This person was a big shot who had caused a stir in the entire starfield during this period of time. Out of the 10 great sects, 5 of them had been destroyed by this person. This was definitely unprecedented and would not be replicated in the future. Although the Half Moon Hall was big and powerful, the law enforcement elder had never thought of going against Zhuowen. But now, he had unknowingly offended this fiend who was feared by everyone in the starfield. Senior Brother Ji's face was deathly pale as his jaw dropped in shock. The person whom he had originally thought to be a nameless person was now revealed to be the terrifying and ruthless Zhuowen. This was a person who dared to destroy a powerful force like the 10 great sects. Although Senior Brother Ji thought that his grandfather was the law enforcement elder and his status in the Half Moon Hall was not low, compared to Zhuowen, it was really insignificant. Han Yang no longer paid any attention to the law enforcement elder as he rushed in front of Zhuowen. His face had already changed into a smile as he said, "Brother Zhuo, I am really sorry that I did not come out to greet you in advance. It was really impolite of me to have frightened you." Zhuowen waved his hand and said indifferently, "It's just a bunch of clowns." As he spoke, Zhuowen casually flung Senior Brother Ji to one side. His gaze landed on the trembling white-clothed man as he said with a voice filled with killing intent, "You still have a chance to live." The man in white's forehead was drenched in cold sweat. He understood the meaning of Zhuowen's words very clearly. Zhuowen wanted him to reveal the person behind the scenes. Otherwise, based on Han Yang's attitude towards Zhuowen, he would not care even if he killed him. The white-robed man trembled as he looked at Senior Brother Ji, who was not far away. Then, he turned around and crawled in front of Zhuowen. "This has nothing to do with me. It was Senior Brother Ji who told me to do this. It was also Senior Brother Ji who told me to frame you for insulting Junior Sister Yuan." Not far away, Senior Brother Ji's face was pale and bloodless. He sat on the ground dejectedly, as if he had lost his soul. The law enforcement elder's eyes widened. He didn't know that his grandson was the mastermind behind this matter. "Pa." The law enforcement elder suddenly arrived in front of Senior Brother Ji and slapped him. Senior Brother Ji was slapped to the ground. His face was red and swollen. "Pa, pa, pa." The law enforcement elder lifted Senior Brother Ji up with his right hand and slapped him without any trace of politeness. Senior Brother Ji's face was swollen like a pig's head in an instant. Then, the law enforcement elder threw Senior Brother Ji to the ground. He knelt in front of Zhuowen and said guiltily, "Brother Zhuowen, it's my fault for not disciplining my unfilial son well. He used such underhanded means to frame you." As he spoke, the law enforcement elder threw Senior Brother Ji in front of Zhuowen. "Brother Zhuowen, I'll leave this unfilial son to you. You can kill him or torture him as you wish. Just pretend that I don't have this grandson." Zhuowen looked at the enforcement elder in surprise. He hadn't expected the enforcement elder to be so impartial. It was beyond his expectations. "Brother Zhuo, Junior Brother Zhuo, the law enforcement elder Ji Wuyuan is famous for being old-fashioned and disciplined. That's why he can hold the position of law enforcement elder." Han Yang whispered. Zhuowen was startled, and then he nodded. He looked down at Senior Brother Ji, who was shivering and unconscious at his feet. He could see that the enforcement elder hadn't held back at all, and had directly injured Senior Brother Ji. "Elder Ji, your grandson might have some misunderstanding with me. That's why he did such a stupid thing. You just have to teach him more in the future. He has suffered a lot. It's enough. He doesn't deserve to die." Zhuowen waved his hand dispiritedly. This kind of thing was a little boring in his eyes. Moreover, he had just arrived at the Half Moon Hall. There was no need to be so forceful and kill as soon as he arrived. It wouldn't be beneficial for him to borrow the star chart of the 8 heavens. The law enforcement elder knelt on the ground and said gratefully to Zhuowen, "Thank you for not killing me, brother Zhuowen." The law enforcement elder took out a jade token and handed it to Han Yang. "Senior Han, this law enforcement token is not suitable for this old man. I'll take my leave." After he finished speaking, the enforcement elder thanked Zhuowen once again and left the peach forest with the delirious senior brother Ji. Han Yang sighed and said, "This old man's temper hasn't changed at all after so many years. He's really stubborn." The law enforcement token was the symbol of the law enforcement elder's status. Only with this token could one be considered a law enforcement elder. Now that Ji Wuji had given the token to Han Yang, it was obvious that he wanted to take the position of law enforcement elder. "Oh right, brother Zhuo, what do you plan to do with this person?" Han Yang suddenly looked at the white-clothed man and asked. Lin Shipping, who was standing beside Han Yang, looked at the white-clothed man with disgust. After hearing that the white-clothed man had insulted her junior sister, Lin Shipping didn't have any good impression of the white-clothed man. "Elder Han, do as you see fit," Zhuowen said indifferently. Han Yang nodded and immediately ordered, "This person insulted our junior sister. According to the sect rules, strip him of his status as a half-moon hall disciple, destroy his cultivation, and expel him from the sect." After Han Yang finished speaking, the two disciples behind him rushed out and grabbed the white-clothed man. A powerful divine power completely destroyed the white-clothed man's cultivation before he was taken away. After the disturbance was resolved, Han Yang smiled at Zhuowen and said, brother Zhuo, it hasn't been long since we met. May I know why you've come to the half-moon hall this time?" Zhuowen smiled and said, "Brother Han, can we talk in private?" Han Yang nodded and the three of them soon arrived at a stone hall at the end of the peach forest. After taking a seat, Zhuowen looked at Lin Shipping and said, "Shipping, why are you here with Elder Han?" Lin Shipping smiled and said, "I'm indebted to Elder Han for taking care of me. He allowed me to work by his side and occasionally gave me some pointers on cultivation." Zhuowen looked at Han Yang in surprise. The latter smiled and said, "I've been in the bone world for too long. At first, I couldn't get used to the outside world. Shipping, like me, has been in the bone world before, so I brought her to my side. It might be easier for me to get used to the outside world." Zhuowen nodded. Soon after, he solemnly said, "Brother Han, to be honest, I have come to Half Moon Hall this time for the star chart of the 8 heavens." Han Yang's smile disappeared and he said seriously, "You want this? I'm afraid that's not possible. This belongs to the Yuezhu. You can't take it away, and I won't let you take it away." Zhuowen smiled bitterly and said, "Brother Han, you've misunderstood. I'm just borrowing it. I've obtained an incomplete map before. That map is too unfamiliar to me and I don't know which heavens it belongs to. So I need to refer to the star chart of the 8 heavens." Chapter 2243. Map borrowing. Zhuowen frowned and asked in a deep voice, "How long does the moon ancestor usually stay in seclusion for?" Yuezhu usually stays in seclusion for hundreds or thousands of years. Ever since the battle between Lord Brahma and the mysterious woman, Yuezhu has only just started his seclusion, so. Han Yang said helplessly. "In other words, I have to wait for Yuezhu to come out of seclusion?" Zhuowen was speechless. Yuezhu usually stayed in seclusion for hundreds or thousands of years. How long would he have to wait for Yuezhu to come out of seclusion? Han Yang's expression changed slightly. "That's not necessarily true. Although I'm the Supreme Elder, Yuezhu was already in seclusion when I returned. I can't contact Yuezhu, but the sect master can. I can help you contact the sect master." Just as Zhuo Wengang was about to agree, his communication jade talisman suddenly lit up. He looked at it and saw that it was a message from Tong Chimei. Her master wanted to meet him to discuss the star chart of the 8 heavens. "Brother Han, come with me to the sect master's great hall. The sect master has already summoned me." Zhuowen stood up and called out to Han Yang. Then, he turned into a streak of light and left the peach forest. Han Yang was surprised, but he still followed closely behind Zhuowen with Lin Shipping. At the entrance of the sect master's great hall, A beautiful figure stood quietly. A gentle breeze blew past, lifting her hair. She was full of charm and charm. The beautiful figure looked in the direction of the peach forest. When she saw 2 streaks of light fly over, her beautiful eyes lit up with joy. The 2 streaks of light stopped in front of the beautiful figure, revealing 3 figures. These 3 people were naturally Zhuowen, Han Yang, and Lin Shipping. The beautiful figure was, needless to say, Tong Chimay. When Tong Chimay saw Han Yang behind Zhuowen, she exclaimed in surprise. However, she didn't forget her etiquette. She bowed and said, "Chimay greets the Supreme Elder. Chimay, you're welcome. Lead us in," Han Yang said with a smile. Tong Chimay nodded and didn't say anything. She led the 3 of them into the sect master's great hall. The sect great hall was extremely luxurious. It was many times more luxurious than the palaces of ordinary emperors. Pillars carved with crescent-shaped patterns stood tall, supporting the huge hall. A large hall, great hall. The great hall's sect master, Saturday. 5 cups of tea and 5 seats were placed on the stone table. 5 seats. Little friend Zhuo, Elder Han, please sit. Elder Waning Moon said with a calm smile. Zhuowen, Han Yang, and the others sat down. Elder Waning Moon took a sip of tea and said softly, "Zhuo Xiaoyu, I heard from Elder Han that it was thanks to you that he was able to come out of the spatial fault. This time, our half-moon hall owes you a favor. Chimay also told me that you wanted to borrow the 8 Heavens Incomplete Star Map. Our half-moon hall has always repaid kindness with kindness and hatred with hatred. Since we owe you a favor and you need the 8 Heavens Incomplete Star Map, I will lend it to you on behalf of the half-moon hall. However, you can only use it for 3 days." Hearing this, Zhuowen naturally agreed. He cupped his fists and said seriously, "If Sect Master Waning Moon is willing to lend us the 8 Heavens Incomplete Star Map, I will be extremely grateful. As for the time, 3 days is enough." Elder Waning Moon nodded and flicked her finger. 8 rays of blue light shot out from her spirit ring. Upon closer inspection, the 8 rays of blue light contained 8 jade slips. Needless to say, each jade slip represented a Heaven's Incomplete Star Map. Seeing Zhuowen put away the 8 jade slips, Elder Waning Moon reminded him, "Zhuo Xiaoyu, these 8 jade slips are not complete. They are more or less incomplete," so, Zhuowen cupped his fists and said, "Thank you. I only need 3 days." After speaking, Zhuowen chatted with Elder Waning Moon and the others for a while before leaving. Tong Chimay naturally took Zhuowen back to her cave. After Zhuowen and Tong Chimay left, Han Yang also left the sect master's hall. Elder Waning Moon was left sitting in front of the stone table. "Elder Waning Moon, what do you think of this Zhuowen?" Suddenly, a low voice slowly resounded in the spacious hall. Elder Waning Moon said, "Ancestor, I feel like this Zhuowen isn't as strong as the rumors say. However, I admit that his talent is much stronger than Chimay's. It hasn't been long, but his cultivation is already at the 6th step of the Void Sky stage. The truth will never be seen through. If you can tell that this child is extraordinary with a single glance, then he will disappoint me. But clearly, that is not the case. Maybe you can't tell that this child is different, but I can. This child has the strength to fight against Lord Brahma." The low voice rang out again. Elder Waning Moon was shocked and said in disbelief, "Ancestor, are you joking? After all, Lord Brahma has grasped the heaven-breaking source and is more terrifying than ordinary void sky cultivators. How can this Zhuowen be so powerful?" The low voice continued, "Perhaps you can't feel it, but I can feel that there is a power hidden in this child's body that makes me very wary. Although I don't know what kind of power it is, I feel that this power has an extremely powerful destructive power. It is even more threatening than Lord Brahma." The more Elder Waning Moon listened, the more shocked she became. Her beautiful face finally became serious. Although she did look at Zhuowen in a new light, that was only the attitude of a senior looking at a junior. However, after hearing this voice's evaluation, she no longer had this attitude. She knew that the power hidden in Zhuowen's body was very likely stronger than hers. At the same time, she thought of the 5 sects that Zhuowen had destroyed. Although those 5 sects couldn't compare to the Half Moon Hall, It would still take a lot of effort for the Half-Moon Hall to destroy those 5 sects. However, Zhuowen had done it by himself. This definitely wasn't a fluke. Pay attention to this child. You must be on good terms with him. Also, I can see that Chimay has a very good impression of this child. If necessary, you can actually betroth Chimay to Zhuowen. The low voice sounded again. However, Elder Waning Moon frowned and said, "Ancestor, this isn't appropriate. After all, Chimay is the future successor of the Half-Moon Hall. If she marries someone else, wouldn't we be handing the Half-Moon Hall over to Zhuowen?" The low voice was silent for a moment before saying, "This matter can't be rushed. Chimay has the bloodline of our Half-Moon Hall's ancestor. As long as Chimay can recover the dusty memories in her mind, she will be able to lead the Half-Moon Hall to an even higher peak. Then it's better to be on good terms with Zhuowen first. The marriage alliance can be delayed. However, it's not a bad thing to let Chimay get closer to this Zhuowen. This Zhuowen has entered the Tower of Hanoi. Sooner or later, he will face the Great Brahma. When that time comes, if this Zhuowen really has the strength to fight against the Great Brahma, why can't our Half-Moon Hall help this Zhuowen attack the Great Brahma?" Elder Waning Moon sighed and said, "Then will he be the next Purple Star Monarch?" Back then, the Purple Star Monarch was so outstanding, but in the end, he still couldn't pass the top level of the Tower of Hanoi. Even if he did pass the top level, he would only be nibbled away by the Great Brahma. Chapter 2244. Spacetime Quicksand River. Zhuowen sat cross-legged on a futon in an elegant attic room. 8 jade slips that emitted a faint blue light floated around him. The 8 jade slips represented the star maps of the 8 heavens. Among them, the star map of the Great Brahma Heavens domain was the most complete. The other 7 heavens maps were more or less incomplete. Zhuowen's glabella shone with a dazzling golden light. Countless rays of divine sense flowed into the 8 jade slips that floated around him. Zhuowen's divine sense was extremely powerful. He divided his divine sense into 8 parts and drilled them into the 8 jade slips. He was multitasking, reading the map in the jade slips. The heavens territory was too vast, so it would take Zhuowen a lot of time to browse through all of them. If an ordinary cultivator wanted to spend 3 days to browse through all 8 jade slips, it would be basically impossible to achieve. However, Zhuowen's divine sense was too powerful. 3 days was more than enough for him. On the morning of the 3rd day, Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes. His gaze fell on the jade slip behind him. He reached out with his right hand and pinched the jade slip in his palm. The other 7 jade slips all fell to the ground, their light dim. 6 desires heaven. Zhuowen looked at the jade slip silently and murmured in a low voice. 6 desires heaven was the heavens where Moyan Wushang was taken away by the mysterious woman. If he remembered correctly, the mysterious woman intended to take Moyan Wushang to 6 desires palace. Decades had passed since then. Speaking of which, Zhuowen missed Moyan Wushang very much. Zhuowen quickly made a copy of the jade slip, then put away the 8 jade slips and walked out of the attic. He had browsed through the star maps of the 8 heavens. Although there were many incomplete places, fortunately, the location of the spacetime key was not in the incomplete area. In the end, Zhuowen locked onto the location of the key in the river of spacetime quicksand in the 6 desires heavens. The river of spacetime quicksand was a forbidden area in the 6 desires heavenly domain. It was an extremely dangerous place, and its name struck terror in the hearts of the people in the 6 desires heavenly domain. When he walked out of the attic, Tong Chimay, who was guarding outside, walked towards him. "Chimay, take this jade slip back. I've already finished reading it." Zhuowen handed the 8 jade slips to Tong Chimay. The latter's beautiful eyes were filled with surprise as she looked at Zhuowen. There was a lot of information about the 8 heavens star charts. Even she wouldn't be able to finish reading them in 3 days, but Zhuowen said that he had finished reading them. Of course, Tong Chimay didn't think that Zhuowen was bragging. It wasn't her first time meeting Zhuowen, and she knew Zhuowen's character. Since Zhuowen said that he had finished reading it, he must have finished reading it. He would never say anything about such a trivial matter. Putting away the jade slip, Tong Chimay asked, Big brother Zhuo, have you found the place you're looking for? Zhuowen smiled and said, found it, thanks to the star chart of the 8 heavens. Where is it? Tong Chimay asked curiously. The river of spacetime quicksand in the 6 desires heavens. Zhuowen said. Tong Chimay wasn't an outsider. She had a good relationship with Zhuowen, so he didn't hide the river of spacetime quicksand. Moreover, even if Tong Chimay knew about the river of spacetime quicksand, without the map on Zhuowen, she couldn't know the correct way to enter the river of spacetime quicksand. After entering, she would be like a blind man searching for an elephant. Only with the real map could she find the spacetime divine key hidden in the river of spacetime quicksand. It's the river of spacetime quicksand? Big brother Zhuo, do you know how dangerous the river of spacetime quicksand is? This place can definitely be called the most dangerous place in the 6 desires heavens. Its reputation is comparable to the great Brahma domain's starry skyfault and waning moons. Do you plan to go there? Tong Chimay's pretty face changed slightly. Obviously, she had heard of the river of spacetime quicksand. Zhuowen smiled and said, Chimay, don't worry. It's not like you don't know my character. I won't do something I'm not confident in. Tong Chimay frowned slightly and could only sigh. She knew Zhuowen's character, so she didn't try to persuade him. She only reminded Zhuowen to be more careful. That's right, Chimay. Do you know where else there are calamity crystals other than the training grounds in the middle universe? Zhuowen suddenly asked. Zhuowen's clone, Devour, had already cultivated to the level of Thunder Fire Real God. However, he had used up all the calamity crystals. As a result, he hadn't even survived a single wind disaster. If he had a large number of calamity crystals now, he would have definitely survived a few wind disasters and wouldn't still be a Thunder Fire Real God. Tong Chimay muttered to herself for a moment and said, the calamity crystals are rare ores. If Big Brother Zhuo needs them, our half-moon hall has some. I can give them to you. How many does your half-moon hall have? Zhuowen asked. Tong Chimay said, about several tens of thousands. I'm not too sure about the specifics. These calamity crystals were obtained by the other disciples in the Middle Universe training grounds. Zhuowen revealed a disappointed expression. Several tens of thousands of calamity crystals were like a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood to him. It should be known that when he had passed through the lightning disasters and fire disasters, he had used up several tens of thousands of calamity crystals, or even millions of calamity crystals. The amount of calamity crystals he had obtained in the training grounds was definitely the most. Unfortunately, Devour was like a bottomless pit. The speed at which he used up the calamity crystals was too fast. After becoming a Thunder Fire Real God, Zhuowen could imagine that Devour's consumption of calamity crystals would be even more ferocious than before. As for waiting for the wind disasters to arrive, it would take too long. Zhuowen really couldn't afford to wait. Tong Chimay could also see the disappointment on Zhuowen's face. She knew that Zhuowen didn't care about the several tens of thousands of calamity crystals. Big brother Zhuo, do you need a lot of calamity crystals? Tong Chimay asked. Zhuowen nodded and said, to be honest, my doppelganger is walking the path of 3 extreme realms. I think you've heard of this realm, so my need for calamity crystals is indeed huge. Tong Chimay wasn't surprised. She had known that Zhuowen's doppelganger was walking the path of 3 extreme realms for a long time. Tong Chimay pondered for a moment and then said in a deep voice, Big brother Zhuo, in the entire Great Brahma domain, other than the training ground in the middle of the universe, only the extreme west has reserves of calamity crystals. It is said that there are mines of calamity crystals in the Yin Qing Yuan Q. Yin Qing Yuan Q? Zhuowen's eyes lit up. Yin Qing Yuan Q was huge. Although Zhuowen and the others had entered the deepest part of Yin Qing Yuan Q, the Luo God Palace ruins, that was only the core of Yin Qing Yuan Q. He was sure that there were no calamity crystals in the Luo God Palace ruins, and Tong Chimay wouldn't lie to him. In other words, the calamity crystals should be outside the core of Yin Qing Yuan Q. Chapter 2245. Riker's strange situation. Many thanks, Chimay. I might have to return to the far west this time. Please send my regards to the sect master, Yuezu, and Elder Han Yang. This is the heavenly domain starry sky essence, please take good care of it. Zhuowen cupped his fists, took out a bottle of heavenly domain starry sky essence, and handed it to Tong Chimei before leaving. Tong Chimei silently watched Zhuowen's back as he left. She let out a soft sigh, but did not try to persuade him to stay. After leaving the half-moon hall, Zhuowen took out his flying ship and left the star field in a streak of light. In the far west, the myriad magnet sea was shrouded in a powerful magnetic field. Ever since the four great islands' failed crusade against Dub City, the myriad magnet sea became the sole ruler of Rika. Rika's fame was unparalleled, and they became the strongest force in the myriad magnet sea and even the far west. Moreover, because Zhuowen obtained all the resources of the Luotian Palace, Rika's development in Dub City was extremely fast. In the far west, all the cultivators who had heard of the Long family were filled with awe. However, most of them were eager to become a disciple of the Long family. In the far west, who did not know that Rika was rich and had a deep foundation. Most of the cultivators who joined Rika had their cultivations greatly increased. They were very clear that this was because Rika was rich in resources, and the energy in the Rika's territory was much denser than the other places in the far west. At this moment, in the Rika Tower in Dub City, Zhuo Xiaotian, Feng Xiao, Lu Hantian, Dou Xian, and the other Rika higher-ups were sitting in the hall, their brows tightly knitted, not saying a word. The entire hall was eerily silent. Finally, Lu Hantian spoke. He stood up and said in a deep voice, "Everyone, what should we do now? Chen Shui has disappeared without a trace. Even if we send out many people, we have no news at all. If Zhuowen comes back, how are we going to explain it to him?" Zhuo Xiaotian, who was standing at the head of the table, looked at Feng Xiao beside him. The latter also saw the look in Zhuo Xiaotian's eyes, but she just lowered her head and didn't speak. Zhuo Xiaotian gave a soft sigh and said, "Keep searching. I think Chen Shui might have gone out to do something and will be back after a while." Dou Xian suddenly spoke up. He cupped his hands at Zhuo Xiaotian and said, "City Lord, Madame Chen Shui was with your wife back then. What happened to Madame Chen Shui? Your wife should know best, right?" Feng Xiao's beautiful eyes condensed, and she immediately said unhappily, "Senior Dou Xian, although you are the strongest in Dub City now and the most respected, my affairs shouldn't be your turn to care, right?" Dou Xian lowered his head and said in a deep voice, "Dou Xian doesn't dare. I'm just voicing my thoughts. If Madam doesn't like it, Dou Xian will apologize to Madam." Feng Xiao silently looked at Dou Xian. Although she was unhappy in her heart, she didn't dare act up. Dou Xian's cultivation was indeed the strongest in Dub City. Over the past 10 years, with the help of the Luotian Palace's resources, Dou Xian had already reached the peak of the Void Sky 7th step, far surpassing all the Rika people in Dub City. Moreover, Dou Xian controlled 70% of Dub City's forces. Although Feng Xiao was unhappy with Dou Xian's words, she didn't dare fall out with Dou Xian. "Ari, don't argue, I'll take care of this matter. As for Chen Shui's matter, Dou Xian hopes that you can send several tens of thousands of troops to help my people look for her." Zhuo Xiaotian waved his hand, trying to smooth things over. He then looked at Dou Xian. Dou Xian raised his head and revealed a mocking smile as he said, "City Lord, I'm very sorry. Our Dub City is currently being eyed by many forces. For the safety of Dub City, you can forget about sending several tens of thousands of troops." When these words came out, Zhuo Xiaotian's eyes immediately became sharp. However, Dou Xian didn't back down at all, as if he didn't put Zhuo Xiaotian in his eyes at all. "Dou Xian, have you forgotten Zhuowen's instructions? You're not the city lord of Dub City right now and Uncle Zhuo is the city lord. Do you plan on disobeying the city lord's orders now?" Lu Hantian's temper was rather irritable. He immediately stood up and spoke in a cold voice. Dou Xian coldly looked at Lu Hantian and said, "I haven't forgotten, so I'm calling Zhuo Xiaotian the city lord. As for orders, only I can manage my troops. Don't even think about interfering." After saying this, Dou Xian stood up and left the hall. The rest of the people in the hall all revealed looks of anger. "Uncle Zhuo, this Dou Xian is too much. He actually doesn't put you in his eyes at all just because his cultivation is high. Lu Hantian said with a frown. Zhuo Xiaotian sighed softly and said, in the past, the reason why Dou Xian was so respectful to me was all because of Zhuoan. However, ever since the news of Zhuoan falling into a fault in the starry sky, Dou Xian doesn't put us in his eyes anymore. There's no one in Rika who can suppress this Dou Xian. Hantian, you have a rather impulsive temper, but don't act recklessly. You're not a match for this Dou Xian. Furthermore, this Dou Xian controls most of the troops in Dub City. It's best not to offend him. Lu Hantian frowned and said, Uncle, if this Dou Xian goes overboard and forcefully seizes the position, what will we do? This Dou Xian is simply a despicable person. It's very likely that he will do such a thing. If he wants to seize the position, then I'll give it to him. As long as he can protect the Rika people, it's fine. Zhuo Xiaotian shook his head helplessly and said. Lu Hantian fell into silence, but he did not refute it. However, there was a flame burning in his eyes. All right, let's end this matter here. You can all leave. Zhuo Xiaotian tiredly waved his hand and the high-level members in the hall all left. Lu Hantian also cupped his hands and left. When there was no one left in the hall, Zhuo Xiaotian suddenly looked at Feng Shiyao beside him and said in a soft voice, Shiyao, what happened? Ever since Chen Shui disappeared, you've been acting strange. Feng Shiyao turned around and Zhuo Xiaotian could clearly see the fear in Feng Shiyao's beautiful eyes. His heart was filled with even more doubts. Xiaotian, Chen Shui almost killed me in the past. She was very terrifying and powerful at that time and I couldn't resist her at all. But in the end, I don't know why, but Chen Shui didn't make a move and just left like a crazy person. Feng Shiyao said in a daze. Zhuo Xiaotian's pupils shrank as he said, that's impossible. How could Chen Shui do something like this? She has always been very gentle. Feng Shiyao suddenly said in a low voice, Chen Shui said before that she was not like herself. She said that there was a strong strange power in her body that seemed to be controlling her, making her do a series of strange things. Zhuo Xiaotian fell into silence. He sat in his seat with tightly knit brows. Suddenly, the sound of hurried footsteps could be heard from outside. Shortly after, the winged Wu Dai hurriedly walked in. Her pretty face was filled with a panicked expression. Wu Dai, what happened? Zhuo Xiaotian looked at Wu Dai and asked. Wu Dai quickly said, Uncle Zhuo, quickly come out and help Han Tian. He and Dou Xian are fighting and if you don't stop them, Han Tian will be beaten to death. What? Chapter 2246. Turning the tables under Wu Dai's lead, Zhuo Xiaotian and Feng Xiao walked out of the hall. Outside the hall, there was a huge square. At this moment, the square was surrounded by a dense mass of soldiers. Their shouts spread out like thunder, and it sounded like they were making a huge commotion. In the center of the square, two figures were exchanging blows at an extremely fast speed. If one looked carefully, one would see that one of the figures was in an extremely sorry state. He was at an absolute disadvantage and was knocked to the ground time and time again. When Zhuo Xiaotian and Feng Xiao were brought to the square by Wu Dai, the cheering soldiers became much softer and consciously opened up a path for them. The surrounding soldiers silently looked at Zhuo Xiaotian, the city lord, but no one shouted the name of the city lord, nor did anyone salute the city lord. Zhuo Xiaotian frowned slightly, but he didn't care about this detail. He was worried about Lu Hantian. Lu Hantian's talent was very strong. Over the years, he relied on the resources of Luotian Palace to raise his cultivation to the 5th step of the Void Sky Realm. However, compared to Dou Xian, who was at the 7th step of the Void Sky Realm, the gap was too big. Therefore, Lu Hantian and Dou Xian fighting now wasn't a wise choice. Bang! A dull sound of something breaking through the air resounded. Immediately after, a sorry figure flew out and crashed in front of Zhuo Xiaotian and the other two. Zhuo Xiaotian shouted and took a step forward. His palms were like the wind as they slammed into the air in front of him. The frightening palm force was just like a furious dragon as it whizzed out. Immediately, it caught the flying figure in his hand. Zhuo Xiaotian's eyesight was amazing. Naturally, he could tell at a glance that the flying figure was Lu Hantian. Boom! When Zhuo Xiaoqian's palms came into contact with Lu Hantian's back, an earth-shattering and terrifying force was transmitted to his hands. Poochie. Spitting out a mouthful of blood, Zhuo Xiaoqian retreated in a sorry state. He only managed to stop himself when he was more than 100 meters away. Zhuo Xiaoqian's eyes flashed with a cold light. This force was extremely terrifying. He also realized that this force didn't come from Lu Hantian himself, but Dou Xian deliberately did it. Xiaoqian, are you all right? Feng Xiao quickly came to Zhuo Xiaoqian's side and said worriedly. Zhuo Xiaoqian shook his head, then gently put down Lu Hantian and said, Hantian's injuries are very serious. Xiao, do you still have any healing pills on you? At this moment, Lu Hantian was in a very miserable state. The clothes in front of Lu Hantian's chest were all dyed red with blood. As for Lu Hantian, his chest was heaving up and down. His eyes were tightly shut and he was completely unconscious. Zhuo Xiaoqian could clearly feel that Lu Hantian's aura was gradually weakening. If he didn't have the support of a powerful healing pill, then Lu Hantian would undoubtedly die. Feng Xiao shook her head and said, Xiaoqian, I've used up all the divine pills on me, so I can only go to the treasury to get some. Zhuo Xiaoqian said, go get it quickly. If you don't use the healing pill, Hantian's injuries will get worse and worse. Feng Xiao also knew that the situation was urgent. She stood up and rushed towards the center of Dub City, while Wu Dai half knelt beside Lu Hantian, her expression full of panic. Bang! Feng Xiao didn't rush out for long before she was blocked by a divine barrier and involuntarily retreated dozens of steps. Dou Xian, what are you doing? Feng Xiao turned her head and looked at Dou Xian behind her with shock and anger in her beautiful eyes. This divine barrier was released by Dou Xian. Dou Xian slowly walked over from the square. The surrounding soldiers all showed a look of reverence and made a path for Dou Xian. They bowed down with a respectful and humble expression. Madam, this is a battle between me and Lu Hantian. It's best if you don't interfere. And the city lord, you too. Dou Xian said slowly. Zhuo Xiaoqian's face suddenly became gloomy. He coldly stared at Dou Xian and said, do you not have me in your eyes? Do you still want to kill in front of me? The corners of Dou Xian's mouth curled into a mocking smile. He laughed and said, kill? Yes, today I will kill in front of the city lord I respect. Do you think you can stop me? What right do you have to stop me? Do you have the strength? Zhuo Xiaoqian trembled with anger. He growled, Dou Xian, don't forget that the reason you were able to advance to the Void Sky 7 steps is because of my son Zhuowen. Back then, you also made an oath to be loyal to my son. Yes, I did say that I was loyal to Zhuowen, but unfortunately, Zhuowen fell into a fault in the starry sky. Even if he didn't die after falling into that place, he would never be able to come out. In other words, my oath back then can be nullified. Dou Xian said indifferently. You. Zhuo Xiaoqian's eyes were crimson red as he spoke coldly. Dou Xian said impatiently, I don't want to play riddles with you now. I once swore to be loyal to Zhuowen, but I didn't say that I would be loyal to you. Since Zhuowen is no longer here, then it's naturally impossible for me to submit to a group of ants with insufficient strength like you. Now, announce that you're giving the position of city lord to me, and I won't kill all of you out of consideration for Zhuowen. Otherwise, don't blame me for being merciless. Zhuo Xiaoqian clenched his fists tightly. His gaze passed by Dou Xian and descended onto the group of soldiers behind him. Unfortunately, all of them lowered their heads when they met Zhuo Xiaoqian's gaze, and they didn't dare to make eye contact with him at all. Dou Xian sneered, don't waste your time. These soldiers will be mine in the future. In the far west, only the strong can rule over the others. All of you aren't qualified. As soon as he said this, the soldiers behind him knelt on the ground one after another and bowed their heads to Dou Xian. Zhuo Xiaoqian's face was deathly pale, and he fell silent. He knew that it was useless for him to say anything now. No matter where he was, he would always rely on his fists to speak. A promise and an agreement would never be reliable. Zhuo Xiaoqian silently glanced at the seriously injured Lu Hantian and the helpless Wu Dai at his feet, as well as Feng Xiao who was not far away with a look of grief and indignation, and he said dejectedly, remember your promise. I'll give you the position of city lord. As he spoke, Zhuo Xiaotian took off the city lord's token from his waist and threw it to Dou Xian. Dou Xian caught the token with a satisfied look in his eyes. With a wave of his right hand, the key to the treasury that was originally in Feng Xiao's hand was forcibly snatched by Dou Xian. Immediately, Dou Xian flicked his finger and took out a divine pill and threw it to Zhuo Xiaotian. Take this healing divine pill. It's more than enough to save that trash's life. Zhuo Xiaotian caught the divine pill and said angrily, this is only a level 3 divine pill. It doesn't have much effect on cold weather. Dou Xian, you're going too far. As soon as Zhuo Xiaotian finished speaking, a powerful divine power swept over. Zhuo Xiaotian let out a muffled groan and was sent flying. He smashed into the ground dozens of meters away, blood spurting from the corner of his mouth. Dou Xian withdrew his hand, and the divine pill in Zhuo Xiaotian's hand automatically floated and fell into Dou Xian's hand. Immediately, Dou Xian said indifferently, if you're not satisfied, I'll take back this divine pill. If you still dare to talk nonsense, I'll be merciless. Chapter 2247. Abdicate the throne. When Zhuo Xiaotian still wanted to get up, Feng Xiao stretched out her jade hand and held Zhuo Xiaotian down. Xiaotian, calm down. If you continue to be so impulsive, then Dou Xian will really kill you. Feng Xiao quickly said. Zhuo Xiaotian forced himself to calm down and looked at Lu Hantian, who was lying unconscious on the ground not far away, with a trace of guilt in his eyes. If he hadn't been so impulsive just now, perhaps that divine pill wouldn't have been snatched away by Dou Xian. Although the level 3 god pill did not have much of an effect on Lu Hantian's recovery, it could at least stop the deterioration of Lu Hantian's injuries. But now, because of his impulsiveness, the divine pill had been taken away by Dou Xian. Zhuo Xiaotian was indeed regretting it. Uncle Zhuo, you don't have to feel guilty. I still have a level 4 healing divine pill. Although it can't heal Han Tian's injuries, it can at least prevent Han Tian's injuries from worsening. Wu Dai took out a pill covered with green patterns from her spirit ring and fed it to Lu Hantian. After swallowing this pill, Lu Hantian's aura stabilized a lot, and his breathing was not as hurried as before. However, the injuries on his body were too serious, and if he wanted to recover, he would need a higher grade healing pill. When Zhuo Xiaotian saw that Lu Hantian's aura had stabilized, he could not help but let out a sigh of relief. Xiaotian, the most important thing now is to think of a way to evacuate the Rika clansmen from the celestial pivot city. Although Dou Xian seems to be letting us go on the surface, I'm afraid that he will secretly kill us. His character is extremely ruthless. Feng Xiao said in a low voice. Zhuo Xiaotian nodded and immediately lifted Lu Hantian and hurriedly left the square with Feng Xiao and Wu Dai. After entering the hall, Zhuo Xiaotian took out his communication jade token and began to gather the Rika tribesmen. Unfortunately, Zhuo Xiaotian waited in the hall for 4 hours, but no one came. His heart sank. He knew that something must have happened to the Rika, and they must have been held back by Dou Xian. Xiaotian, this is bad. There's a trap array outside. We can't get out. Feng Xiao stood by the window, her pretty face changed greatly as she said to Zhuo Xiaotian. Zhuo Xiaotian suddenly slammed his palm on the table and said with a gloomy expression, "What a good Dou Xian. He really didn't plan to let us go. Just now, it was just a stalling tactic. His goal was to make me give up the Dub City Lord's waste token. Then what should we do?" Feng Xiao was also a little flustered. Zhuo Xiaotian frowned, but he could only sit in his seat dejectedly. He really couldn't find a good way to leave this place. Dou Xian had already planned everything that he could think of. Over the past decade, especially after the news of Zhuoan falling into the starry sky fault had spread to the far west, Dou Xian had begun to stir. With Dou Xian's prestige and strength, he quickly took control of most of the military forces in Dub City. In this kind of place, strength and military force were everything. The city lord was just a title. If Dou Xian wanted to usurp the throne, he only needed to say a word and he would successfully become the new city lord. However, Dou Xian didn't do that. He wanted Zhuo Xiaotian to take the initiative to abdicate and give up the city lord. Zhuo Xiaotian, in 3 days, I will hold the city lord conferring ceremony in the square. You must be there. Otherwise, I can't guarantee the safety of your Riker people." Suddenly, Dou Xian's voice echoed in the hall. Zhuo Xiaotian raised his head, his eyes turning red, but he didn't lose his mind. "If you dare to touch a hair of my people, I, Zhuo Xiaotian, will make you regret it." Zhuo Xiaotian said coldly. Dou Xian's voice sounded again. "Don't worry, if you cooperate in 3 days, I, Dou Xian, will let your people leave Dub City safely. If you violate this oath, the heavenly Tao will devour you." Zhuo Xiaotian's eyes flashed. This Dou Xian was swearing on the heavenly Tao. It seemed that he really intended to let the Riker people go. "If you really let the Riker people leave safely, I will participate in the City Lord conferring ceremony in 3 days, Zhuo Xiaotian said coldly. City Lord is indeed straightforward. This will be the last time I call you City Lord. In 3 days, the new City Lord of Dub City will be born, haha. Dou Xian's voice was like thunder. It came and went quickly. 3 days later, in Dub City's largest square, Dub Square, people came and went. It was very lively. In the center of the square stood a white jade platform. Dou Xian sat on the throne in the center of the platform. On his left and right stood 2 black-armored cultivators with vast auras. The square was surrounded by a dark mass. In addition to the soldiers, there were also the Star Lords of the planets in the Ziwei galaxy around Dub City. The so-called Star Lords were the lords of the planets. They ruled over the living beings of one of the planets in the Ziwei galaxy. Most of them were in the virtual sky world, but of course, they were generally in the early stage of the virtual sky world. At this moment, the Star Lords around the square were looking at Dou Xian on the platform with awe. Although many people knew that a new city lord might be born today, no one came out to speak for justice. They knew that even if Zhuo Xiaotian was the rightful city lord of Dub City, he was not strong enough. As for Zhuo Wen, who was revered by everyone in Dub City, many cultivators in Dub City no longer feared the Long family because of the news that Zhuo Wen had fallen into a fault in the starry sky. It could be said that the cultivators of Dub City were not in awe of the Riker, but Zhuowen. Since something happened to Zhuowen and the Riker did not have an extremely strong cultivator, they naturally did not have the support of the cultivators of Dub City. At this moment, the dark mass of people on the east side of the square consciously parted to form a path. At the end of the path, 3 people slowly walked over. They were Zhuo Xiaotian, Feng Xiao, and Wu Dai. Lu Hantian was seriously injured, so Zhuo Xiaotian had arranged for him to stay in the hall. As for the trap formation outside the hall, it was removed by Dou Xian on the 3rd day. Dou Xian looked at Zhuo Xiaotian and the other 2 slowly walking over with a smile on his face. "You're finally here, my dear city lord." Zhuo Xiaotian was expressionless as he slowly walked to the bottom of the white jade platform. After telling Feng Xiao and Wu Dai to wait below, he stepped onto the white jade platform. Zhuo Xiaotian came in front of Dou Xian and said coldly, "Dou Xian, remember the oath you made in front of me 3 days ago?" Dou Xian raised his eyebrows and said, "Don't worry, I swore to the heavenly Tao. Do you think I dare to go back on my words?" Zhuo Xiaotian nodded and then ignored Dou Xian. He turned his head and came to the edge of the platform. Facing the dark mass of people on the square below, he said loudly, "Today, I, Zhuo Xiaotian, announce that I resign from the position of City Lord. I intend to hand over the new City Lord to Dou Xian. He is more qualified than me." Just as the City Lord conferring ceremony was in full swing, a stream of light swept over from the edge of the myriad magnet sea. It was a flying ship. Chapter 2248. Fury on Dub Square. The moment Zhuo Xiaotian abdicated and gave the City Lord position to Dou Xian, the crowd around the square burst into earth-shattering cheers. "Welcome, new City Lord." Around the square, rows of soldiers in black armor knelt on one knee and bowed to Dou Xian, who was sitting on the throne on the high platform, to show their allegiance. Dou Xian looked at all of this silently with a smug smile on his face. Zhuo Xiaotian, who was standing at the edge of the high platform, lowered his head slightly, his eyes full of helplessness. From the reaction of the crowd in the square, It could be seen that Dou Xian had completely controlled the soldiers of Dub City for more than 10 years, and Zhuo Xiaotian knew nothing about it. Now that he saw the cheers of the soldiers below the high platform, his heart was full of helplessness and he sighed. He knew that he was a failure as the city lord of Dub City. Dou Xian stood up and pressed his hands in the air. The cheering crowd around the high platform suddenly fell silent. All eyes were on Dou Xian. They were all waiting for him to continue. Dou Xian was very satisfied with the crowd's reaction. He clenched his right hand, and a terrifying divine power turned into a huge hand that grabbed at Zhuo Xiaotian. Zhuo Xiaotian did not expect Dou Xian to make a move, so he was not prepared. At this moment, Zhuo Xiaotian's face changed drastically. His reaction was fast enough, but he only took out a divine weapon to block in front of him. Pucci. The divine power hand slammed into his defensive divine weapon, and Zhuo Xiaotian flew out like a kite with a broken string. Blood spurted out from his mouth like a fountain, and he looked extremely miserable. Bang! Zhuo Xiaotian fell below the high platform, and the defensive divine weapon in front of him dimmed. He spat out another mouthful of blood. Xiaotian, are you okay? Feng Xiao immediately rushed over and helped Zhuo Xiaotian up, her beautiful eyes full of worry and anger. Zhuo Xiaotian had already given up the city lord position, so why did Dou Xian still make a move and a sneak attack? He was too despicable. Dou Xian, you despicable and shameless bastard. You clearly promised the mayor that as long as he gave up his position, you would let the Riker safely leave Dub City. Wu Dai said angrily. Dou Xian slowly walked to the edge of the high platform and looked down at Zhuo Xiaotian and the other two. He said casually, yes, I did say that, and I even swore to the heavens that I would let the Riker off. However, I never said that I would let the old Castellan go. After I kill the old Castellan, I will naturally let all the Riker off. Dou Xian's gaze swept over the crowd on the square as he continued, whoever kills the old Castellan, Dou Xian will reward them handsomely, at least one grade 7 divine pellet. As soon as Dou Xian said this, the eyes of everyone in the square turned red. A level 7 divine pill was an extremely rare treasure. They might not even be able to obtain it in their dreams. Now that Dou Xian had directly promised them a level 7 divine pill as long as they killed the old city lord, who wouldn't do it? Kill. As long as we kill this Zhuo Xiaotian, we'll be able to obtain a level 7 divine pill. Go. That's right. Kill this Zhuo Xiaotian. What qualifications does a trash have to become the Castellan? He'd better die as soon as possible. All of a sudden, the eyes of the cultivators around the square turned red. One after another, attacks erupted from their hands. They were like dazzling fireworks that suddenly exploded out of thin air. It looked gorgeous and colorful. Zhuo Xiaotian roared angrily and poured all his divine power into his defensive divine artifact. A golden semicircle appeared around the three of them. At the same time, Wu Dai and Feng Xiao also took out their own defensive divine artifacts to protect themselves from the attacks coming from all directions. Peng peng peng. The dense sounds of collisions were incessant, and the dazzling explosions were multicolored, like bright and glistening flowers. There were simply too many people around the square. With so many attacks coming at them, even Zhuo Xiaotian and the other two couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. It was extremely difficult for them to resist. Dou Xian sat back on the throne and looked down coldly at Zhuo Xiaotian and the other two who were bitterly holding on under the attacks of the crowd. Back then, he had made a heavenly Dao oath to Zhuo Xiaotian, but he had made a small move in the oath. He had only let the other Riker people go, but not Zhuo Xiaotian. Moreover, even if he fulfilled the oath and let the other Riker people go, he would secretly send people to completely eradicate the Riker people to prevent future trouble. Dou Xian knew very well that Zhuo Xiaotian and the other two wouldn't be able to hold on for long. In a while, Zhuo Xiaotian and the other two would be completely blown to smithereens by the attacks of the crowd. At this moment, hundreds of billions of kilometers away from Dub City surrounded by the Z-Wei galaxy, a stream of light was flying over like a bolt of lightning. Its speed had reached an incredible level. After a while, the stream of light from hundreds of billions of kilometers away entered the range of the Z-Wei galaxy and finally stopped in the starry sky outside Dub City. The light faded away, revealing a flying ship that was as black as ink. The airship was not large. The hatch of the airship opened and a young man in snow-white clothes slowly stepped out. "I've finally returned to Dub City. I wonder how father and mother are doing. And what is Chen Shui doing now?" The corners of Zhuowen's mouth curled into a smile. Immediately, his powerful divine sense subconsciously swept towards Dub City. Zhuowen's divine sense was now extremely powerful. A mere Dub City was too small for his divine sense. He instantly swept through the entire Dub City. However, the smile on the corners of Zhuowen's mouth quickly became extremely stiff, and his gaze became murderous. "Do Xian, you're simply courting death." Zhuowen's eyes surged with murderous intent. He took a step forward and rushed towards the interior of Dub City. At this moment, the defensive divine artifact released by Zhuo Xiaotian was getting dimmer and dimmer, but the surrounding attacks were getting stronger and stronger, as if there was no end to them. Bang! Finally, countless cracks appeared on the surface of the light shield and it finally collapsed with a loud bang. Zhuo Xiaotian and the other two spat out a mouthful of blood at the same time. Their faces were pale and bloodless, and they were extremely weak. "It seems that we're finished." Zhuo Xiaotian raised his head with difficulty and looked at the attacks whistling towards him. His eyes were filled with despair. Without the defense of the divine artifact, it was impossible for the three of them to resist such a terrifying attack. These attacks were enough to tear the three of them to pieces. There might not even be ashes left. The moment these attacks were about to hit Zhuo Xiaotian and the other two, a figure in fluttering white clothes suddenly rushed over and landed in front of them. Chapter 2249. Powerful you all, deserve to die. The white-robed youth said expressionlessly. With a wave of his right hand, the attacks that had been stationary suddenly changed direction and flew in the opposite direction. All of a sudden, screams could be heard all around the square. It was as if something extremely tragic had happened in this world. Bang bang bang. Suddenly, 50% of the cultivators around the square died on the spot, 30% were seriously injured, and the remaining 20% were more or less injured. After all, Zhuowen wasn't returning the attacks to them. Instead, he was adding his own power to the attacks. That was why the attacks were so terrifying. Zhuo Xiaotian and the other two, who had been waiting for death with their eyes closed, immediately noticed the white-robed youth in front of them. Especially when they saw the white-robed youth's face, they were overjoyed. "Zhuowen, you're back. You're finally back." Feng Xiao immediately stepped forward and hugged Zhuowen, sobbing. When she heard that Zhuowen had fallen into a fault in the starry sky, Feng Xiao was sad for a long time. This was her only son. Zhuowen patted Feng Xiao's back to comfort her, while Zhuo Xiaotian came in front of Zhuowen and patted him on the shoulder. He said with some guilt, "Zhuowen, I've let you down. I didn't do a good job as the city lord of Dub City." Zhuowen shook his head and looked around, but did not see any Rika people. He said in a deep voice, "Father, where are the Rika people?" Zhuo Xiaotian said softly, "The Rika people are fine, but Han Tian, what happened to brother Han Tian?" Zhuowen asked with a slightly changed expression. "Han Tian was seriously injured by that bastard Do Xian, and the key to our treasury was taken away by Do Xian. Han Tian can't be treated, and his injuries are worsening. Do Xian forced your father to give up the position of city lord, and your father did so, but Do Xian still wants to kill your father. He's really abominable." Feng Xiao's beautiful eyes were filled with killing intent. Zhuowen's gaze gradually turned cold. Soon after, he turned around and lifted his head to look at Do Xian, who was still seated on the throne on the white jade platform. A murderous intent suddenly swept out like a vast ocean. Do Xian frowned slightly, but he did not fear Zhuowen at all. Although he was afraid of Zhuowen back then, it was naturally because of Zhuowen's strength. At that time, Do Xian's cultivation was only at the 6th stage of the void sky. But Do Xian's strength was different. Over the past 10 years, Zhuowen's cultivation, he had directly reached the peak of the 7th stage of the void sky void realm. Therefore, Do Xian's self-confidence had swelled to the extreme, and he didn't even put Zhuowen in his eyes. Even if Zhuowen came over now, he thought that even if he wasn't a match for Zhuowen, if he wanted to escape, Zhuowen really couldn't stop him. Moreover, he was now the city lord of Dub City and commanded such a huge force. If he gathered these forces, he might not be a match for Zhuowen. After all, the current Zhuowen was alone. How could he be a match for the entire Dub City? Boom! The killing intent in Zhuowen's eyes became more and more vigorous, and a terrifying aura swept out like a hurricane, blasting in all directions. Dou Xian's pupils shrank. The pressure on him was too terrifying. It actually gave him the feeling of being crushed by a huge mountain, and he was like an ant that could be crushed into powder by this huge mountain at any time. Bang! Suddenly, the white jade platform under Dou Xian's feet shattered into powder, and Dou Xian fell from it in a rather sorry state. His legs were unstable, and he almost knelt on the ground. Zhuowen slowly walked over, and the aura on his body became more and more terrifying. The entire square seemed to evaporate like water vapor, and the space distorted, blurring one's vision. Dou Xian's legs trembled. Zhuowen's aura was so oppressive that he almost couldn't breathe. Only then did Dou Xian realize that Zhuowen's strength was so strong. In other words, the current Zhuowen's strength was much stronger than before. Die! Dou Xian's eyes became fierce. He took out a black lotus from his spirit ring and threw it at Zhuowen. The black lotus rapidly expanded, and black tentacles grew out of the black stamen. They wrapped around Zhuowen's body, and in an instant, covered Zhuowen's entire body. Dou Xian stomped his right foot, turned into a stream of light, and fled out of Dub City. Dou Xian was very clear that with the powerful aura Zhuowen had just displayed, the Black Lotus wouldn't be able to trap Zhuowen at all. Unfortunately, Dou Xian didn't escape for long. Two sword lights suddenly rushed out from inside the Black Lotus, and pierced a big hole in the Black Lotus. Dou Xian felt the two sword lights behind him, and suddenly took out a long black spear. With a shake of his hands, the long spear's black gas evaporated, and a lifelike huge black dragon condensed. The black dragon opened its mouth and swallowed the two sword lights. Its huge dragon tail suddenly swung, and ruthlessly smashed the Black Lotus into powder. Unfortunately, just as the dragon tail was swung out, it was immediately caught by Zhuowen, who was inside the Black Lotus. "Come down for me." Zhuowen's right hand exerted force, and the black dragon was directly smashed to the ground. At the same time, two huge holes appeared in its body, and two sword lights rushed out from those holes again. Mother K, a mere 7th level Void Sky cultivator, dares to be so arrogant in front of this dragon lord. Today, this dragon lord will cripple you. Little blood disciple, come with me. Xiao Hei's somewhat unhappy voice came from the Thunder Fire Sword, and the Blood Immortal Sword behind the Thunder Fire Sword quickly responded. Due to the urgency of the situation, it didn't flatter and attacked Dou Xian with a loud cry. Dou Xian's eyes were gloomy. He stabbed out with his spear, and the surrounding space was distorted, and strange crackling sounds came from it. The Blood Immortal Sword cried out loudly, and for the first time, it became so bold and fierce, and actually collided with Dou Xian's long spear. Countless sparks flew, and the Blood Immortal Sword cried out, and was sent flying by Dou Xian's spear. However, because of the Blood Immortal Sword's powerful attack, Dou Xian's right hand trembled, and he couldn't help but retreat hundreds of steps. He looked at the blood-red divine sword in amazement. He was extremely shocked. This blood-red divine sword was only a divine weapon, and not only did it have such a highly intelligent sword spirit, but its power was probably no weaker than an ordinary 7th level Void Sky cultivator. Right now, Dou Xian was truly terrified. The divine sword that Zhuowen sent out actually had such terrifying power, then what if Zhuowen personally took action? Wouldn't he be defeated immediately? While Dou Xian's imagination was running wild, the Thunder Fire Sword, with the power of thunder and fire, rushed over like a storm. Dou Xian came back to his senses and suddenly pointed his long spear. Suddenly, spear lights filled the sky and began to rotate counterclockwise, with a strange and terrifying power of distortion. "Trash," Xiao Hei said with extreme disdain. The Thunder Fire Sword suddenly slashed out, and the countless spear lights were completely shattered into countless pieces like paper. The power of thunder and fire was like a terrifying angry dragon, and it suddenly blasted in front of Dou Xian. Poochie. The moment Dou Xian came in contact with the power of thunder and fire, he He suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. He raised his long spear with both hands, and resisted the power of thunder and fire with difficulty. How is this possible? This divine sword is even more terrifying than the blood-red divine sword. Dou Xian's eyes were full of shock. The power of the thunder-fire sword was too terrifying. It was probably comparable to an 8th level void sky cultivator. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.